Okay.
All right. Good evening. The time is now 6 o'clock, and I would like to welcome everybody to the regular Galt City Council meeting for Tuesday, October the 19th of 2021. Due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic emergency, we have to continue to handle our city council meetings much differently than we usually do for the protection of the public and our city staff. I'm now going to ask our city manager, Mr. Hines, to give a brief explanation to the public. Mr. Hines.
Good evening, City Manager Lorenzo Hines. This meeting of the Galt City Council is being conducted by teleconference/video conference in compliance with Assembly Bill 361. Members of the public will see the council members and city staff who are appearing via remote video/telephone connections. City council meetings will be held virtually by teleconference or video conference only until further notice. Today's agenda states that we are also using the Zoom webinar format, which allows the public to provide live public comment. Members of the public may use the link to enter their webinar as attendees. They should be able to use the raise their hand option in the Zoom webinar to let us know if they would like to speak, and should do so when the mayor announces the time for general public comment or when a specific agenda item is called, if your comment concerns an item on the agenda. Attendees should also see a lower hand feature if they change their minds and do not want to speak. In addition, members of the public may use the call-in feature also described on the agenda. You may just listen if you prefer, but if you would like to speak when the mayor announces the time for public comment, you may do so by pressing *9 at that time. We request, as we do at typical in-person council meetings, that speakers provide their name and address when they are called on to speak, but doing so is not required. Today's agenda also states that residents may submit written public comments via email to pubcom@cityofgalt.org prior to the council meeting. In view of the direct video conference and call-in direct opportunities for public comment just described, email comments will not be read out loud during the meeting, but will be distributed to City Council and made part of the official minutes and posted to the city's website prior to the meeting. Mr. Mayor, that concludes my comments. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Now I'll call the meeting to order. Can I have a roll call, please?
Vice Mayor Sandu.
Here.
Councilmember Papineau.
Here.
Councilmember Vandenberg.
Here.
Councilmember Lozano.
Here.
Mayor Farmer.
Here. If everyone would please join us in a silent prayer followed by our flag salute. Please join me in a pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you, everybody. Tina, can you please read our replay statement?
This meeting of the Galt City Council will be cablecast on Metro Cable 14, the local government affairs channel, on the Comcast Consolidated Communications and AT&T Uverse cable systems. The meeting is closed captioned and webcast at www.sacmetrocable.tv. Today's meeting will air Friday, October 22nd at 9 a.m. and Saturday, October 23rd at 9 a.m. This meeting can also be viewed at youtube.com/MetroCable14.
All right, thank you. I'll move on to item B, agenda approval, additions and or deletions. Do I have anything from the council? No, okay. Then we'll move on to item C, public comment. Tina?
Under Government Code Section 54954.3, members of the public may address the City Council on non-agenda items. The public comment section is for the City Council to receive comments Except for brief responses to questions, no discussions or action may be taken on any item that is not listed on the agenda. Please limit comments to a maximum of 5 minutes. Due to the statewide emergency, public comments may also be submitted as noted via the options listed on the first page of the agenda for providing live public comment or prior to the meeting via email to pubcom@cityofgalt.org by 4:00 p.m. on the day of the meeting, which will be distributed to City Council and posted on the city's website prior to the meeting, but will not be read out aloud.
All right, thank you. So to remind everyone who's watching at home, we are not going to be reading public comment emails aloud. So again, if you have a public comment that has been emailed, we are given that and it will be posted in the minutes and in the official records, but we will not be reading those. So you will need to raise your hand, and when is appropriate time on the agenda item or during this public comment, and we will call on you. Do we have any hands raised currently for public comment?
We do not have any hands raised online.
Okay, so this is the public comment period. Should you want to raise your hand and speak, you can do so on the Zoom if you are logged in. If you are on telephone, you can press *9 and raise your hand that way, and we will call on you. I will give everyone a few more seconds here before we move on to allow for anybody to speak. All right, do we have no public comment, Rose?
We have no hands raised.
Okay. We will move on to our next item then, which is D, presentations. Tonight we have the Beautification Committee Annual Report to the City Council.
We have Gail Weber on the line. Gail, if you want to go ahead and unmute your microphone. Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes,
we can. Good evening, Gail.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council members. My name is Gail Weber, and I am the Chair of the Galt Beautification Committee. It is my pleasure to present the Council with the Beautification Committee Annual Report for fiscal year 2020 and 2021. This report outlines the committee's responsibilities and activities. The Beautification Committee's mission is to enhance, restore, and beautify the City of Galt by advocating a high standard of community involvement, cleanliness, maintenance, and attractiveness. The purpose and function of the Beautification Committee is to act as an advisory committee to the City Council and make recommendations on projects designed to maintain and improve the appearance of the public areas within the city. The committee was affected greatly this fiscal year by COVID and did not get a chance to meet as a group until February 18th, 2021. With the remainder of the fiscal year, the committee was excited to jump back into planning road cleanups. The committee also started a new way for the community to get involved with Nominate Your Neighbor by creating a new email that anyone could submit nominations to. I would like to thank my fellow current committee members for their efforts, Paige Lampson, Amy Sandu, Darlene Brown, and Mara Firestone. That concludes the Beautification Committee report to Council. I would like to thank the Council for the opportunity to serve the community and to provide this report. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Gail, and thank you to the Beautification Committee for all that you guys do. You know that beautification is a big personal priority for myself, and so I thank you for what you guys do, and happy you guys are back in action. Does any of the council have any comment or questions for Gail?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
I just only would like to thank you for Gail Weber's service in this committee and all other some committees. Thank you for the service and other committee members. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, well, thank you for the report, Gail, and keep us briefed on anything that beautification is going to be doing that we can be a part of. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Do we have any public comment on this particular item?
We have one hand raised.
Okay,
Ryan Montgomery.
go ahead, Ryan. Unmute your microphone.
I think I need to be, it's my mistake. I should have raised my hand during the city manager update, the COVID-19 update. That's when I want to speak.
Okay, that's fine, sir. All right, if we have no other public comment, again, if you wish to comment, you can press *9 if you are on the phone, or you can raise your hand on the Zoom webinar.
And there are no hands raised.
Okay, thank you, Rose. We will then move on to item E, reports by city council members on regional boards, commissions, and committees. We will start with the Vice Mayor, Mr. Sandu. Go ahead.
Nothing to report this time.
Okay, thank you, sir. Councilmember Papineau.
I don't have anything to report this week.
All right. Councilmember Vandenberg.
I have nothing to report.
Okay, Councilmember Lozano.
I have nothing to report.
Okay. I thought I had something, but maybe I'm thinking of something that wasn't official. No. I don't have anything to report either. So we will move on to item F, our information consent calendar. I would like to announce that if you do want to comment on any of the consent items, please raise your hand. I'm officially opening that public comment period right now, and you can press *9 to raise your hand if you're on the phone. So it is recommended that items 1 through 4 be acted on simultaneously unless a separate discussion and/or action is requested by a council member. Item 1 of the consent calendar is going to be the minutes of the regular meeting from October the 5th, 2021. Item 2 is going to be receive and file warrants for period ending October 6th of 2021. Item 3 is the first amendment to the agreement with Sacramento County for South County Transit Link, SCT/Link, sharing of responsibilities and cost. And item 4 is going to be the reappointment to Sacramento Environmental Commission, Mr. Thomas Malson. Do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Move.
Second.
Actually, before I do that, I'm sorry, do we have public comment on this item?
We have no hands raised online.
Okay. I need to wait a few seconds for anyone should they want to comment. I apologize for that. Public comment is open. If you'd like to raise your hand, please do so now. Do we have any hands raised online, Rose?
We currently do not have any hands raised.
Okay. Now can I please have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So move.
Moved by Councilmember Vandenberg,
Second.
seconded by Councilmember Lozano. Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Vice Mayor Sandu,
Aye.
Councilmember Papineau,
Aye.
Councilmember Vandenberg,
Aye.
Councilmember Lozano,
Aye.
Mayor Farmer.
Aye. Consent calendar approved 5-0. We will now move on to our next item G, scheduled matters, notice of public hearing. Do we have any this evening, Tina?
And this evening.
Okay. We will now move on to our regular calendar, item H, from the city manager's office. Our first item is going to be our coronavirus COVID-19 update. Mr. Hines?
Good evening, everyone. Can everyone see my PowerPoint?
Yes, sir.
All righty, very good. This is the COVID-19 update for October 19th, 2021. As you can see, the cases, and we track, for those folks who haven't seen this before, we track the cases both at the county level and at the city level. The number of cases in Sacramento County has grown by 2%, or a little over 3,000. The number of deaths in Sacramento County is up 4%, or 82 individuals. The number of cases here within the city of Galt has gone up 81, or 2%, and the number of deaths here in the city of Galt has increased by 2, or 4%. Sacramento County Public Health, the daily case rate is currently at 14.1 per 100,000, and that's down from 15.9 per 100,000 when we had our prior council meeting. Area hospitals currently have 185 COVID hospitalizations, and that's down from 232 after our last council meeting. Less than 5 of those hospitalized are pediatric patients, which is down from the October 5th number as well. COVID-19 testing is now offered every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday in Galt at the Jabola Center and at the Parks and Recreation offices. Testing details are only available for the Thursday test site. On Thursday, October 14th, we had 169 tests administered compared to 210 on October 7th. So the information regarding COVID-19 testing sites in Galt can be found at our website and our social media pages. And Mr. Mayor, that concludes my presentation for this week.
All right, thank you, sir. Do we have any public comment on this particular item? Any hands raised?
We have Mr. Ryan Montgomery.
Okay, Mr. Montgomery, go ahead, unmute yourself.
Give him just a second. Ryan, go ahead and unmute.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So what I'm going to be talking about is a speech I've written, and it's basically, it kind of ties into a Parks and Rec situation with the Youth Basketball League. So here it goes. Dear members of the City Council, I come before you today to speak regarding the mask policy being implemented by Parks and Rec for their Youth Basketball League. Making school-aged children wear a mask while playing basketball is insane and a huge liability. I can assure you that whoever made this policy has never actually played basketball. Playing basketball is an intensive cardio workout. With all the stop and go running on the court, the kids are already in major need of oxygen when they play. If you put a mask on kids while doing this, I want to warn the City Council, you are asking for a huge liability. Something very bad is going to happen under this insane policy. As someone who has gladly coached basketball for Parks and Rec and had my son play for the last several years, I refuse to be part of such a reckless and dangerous policy. I know I'm not the only parent by a mile that feels this way. I know tons of people in Galt that have pulled their kids out of this league for this policy alone, and with many more to come. Eventually, we need to start realizing that these reckless, unscientific, and idiotic policies that Sacramento keeps churning out have nothing to do with science and everything to do with politics. Eventually, we need to be honest about the fact that Galt is less than an afterthought to Gavin Newsom and Sacramento. When are we going to start doing right by our own community and start taking care of its many needs without mindlessly saying, well, Sacramento told us so, so we must blindly obey? Sacramento does not have Galt's best interests in mind when they make these policies, and everyone knows it. For Sacramento, it's merely part of executing a political plan. How much longer will we allow our youth to be pulled into this obvious political skullduggery? Furthermore, when our governor says postal workers, prison guards, and even members of Congress are exempt from this experimental vaccine, but school-aged children still have to take it, that is not science, that's politics, in its darkest and most shameful form. Yet the many Sacramento bureaucrats will keep braying on saying, follow the science. It's about time we start to acknowledge this for what it really is. Our youth need to be protected from this type of slithery stupidity. There are so many other policies to point to with this garbage. We've all seen them or read about them. How much longer should Galt obey a governor who does not practice what he preaches? Our governor, who made all of our children be on distance learning for a year and a half, but sent his kids to school on campus the entire time. Our governor, who shut down countless small businesses and restaurants when he went to French Laundry with a bunch of medical lobbyists, maskless no less. Our governor, who tells children to mask up and get vaccinated, but he won't vaccinate his own children, and apparently they don't have to wear masks either. He very clearly doesn't believe what he's saying, nor does he think this virus is as serious he claims when the cameras are on. The proof is in the pudding. It is time Galt did what is best for Galt, not what Sacramento tells us is best for Galt. Galt's youth has already paid more than enough of a price with their childhood. Thank you for your time and have a great evening.
Thank you, Mr. McGovern, and we appreciate your expressing your views. Have a good evening, sir. Does anybody have, is there any additional hands raised online? I'm sorry.
There are no other hands raised online.
Okay. Mr. Hines, I know the subject about the basketball came up before, and I know that you had explained to us about the school policy with the masks being worn. But I wanted to mention, since this comment came up during public comment, that I was made aware that apparently wrestling is not one of those sports. I thought it was kind of, I know we don't make these policies, that's a school policy, but I just would like to comment thinking it seems kind of a strange double standard when wrestling, you're so close to your opponent. Also, I was made aware at your direction, Mr. Hines, about the photograph that was shared regarding the high school volleyball. And what I actually thought was strange was the photograph that was shared with me. There was 8 players, I believe, in the photograph, and only one of them actually was wearing their mask. So I'm not here to police up policy, but I just think it's kind of senseless if you're going to have a policy for people to wear a mask and all the players have them below their chin, not even covering their mouth or their face. So what I would like to ask Mr. Solis is, do you have an idea of how many people have withdrawn from the basketball because of this policy? Do we have any idea?
Withdrawn, I don't know. I can tell you what our numbers are today.
Okay, what would that be?
We have 232 people signed up as of today, and our 3-year average is 516.
Okay. So I know there was one complaint. We had a couple of emails from citizens about this policy and they withdrew. So is it a few? Is it a dozen? I mean, do we have a ballpark idea of how many people have asked for a refund?
I don't have an idea. I mean, I can tell you it's been a few. I don't have that exact number. We're not tracking that. If people have asked for, everything's been on the literature. And again, this isn't our policy, as Mr. Montgomery said, it is the county's policy.
All right.
Well,
Hines, you have any comment? Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I just want the caller to know that we do emphasize with him. We know that these are difficult times, and does not seem to be a certain level of consistency with some of the policies that we're seeing. And Mr. Mayor, this is the first I've heard about wrestling, and that would be a bit inconsistent. But these are strange times, and all I ask is that there be a fair amount of patience out there in the community, because we're under the guidance of the county, who is under the guidance of the state, and to a certain degree, the state's under the guidance of the federal government. And I think we're just doing the best we can to try to stay within the rules. And hopefully one day this will be over and we can get back to normal. And that's all I wanted to say, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Thank you, sir. Would any of the council have any comments on this?
Well, I would comment, the city manager mentioned inconsistency. I did note the Kings are playing basketball within Sacramento County, and no masks on the court, maybe 50% on the bench, and a smattering throughout the spectators. So, I understand we're stuck with the county's guidance, but may come a time where we have to apply a little bit of common sense and start allowing that, because I have a problem sometimes wearing a mask and seeing down low when I'm going down the stairs. So I can imagine these kids with a mask on their face trying to dribble a basketball or see down to the floor, and it is, does seem to be a hazard to me. So I wouldn't mind if I bring it up at the end, but if we did have a further discussion about adjusting our policy.
Understood.
Would it be possible for, I mean, I know we reached out to the county to get clarity on this last time it came up, but in light of what Councilor Papineau brought up about the Kings, I would really like to question the county on the example that they're setting. If they're not going to, require from a professional level, then doesn't set a very good precedent or an example for us at the youth level. So, I mean, is there a way that we could just reach out and kind of put the question to them about, is that in fact what's happening? And if so, then why are we required? I mean, just a thought. So
I have my quarterly meeting with, my monthly meeting with the Sacramento County Area Parks and Rec directors on Thursday. I'm hoping to get my question answered about the masks. I know there's a provision in there for entertainment that they are not required to wear masks. I'm sure that they're probably using that as entertainment, but I will try and get clarity on that on Thursday when I meet with them.
Okay, that would be great. Councilmember Vice Mayor Sandy, did you have your hand up or you lowered it?
Just Mr. Mayor, I believe you already asked that question. The same thing I will ask the city manager. You know, this is a bad example. It's the same county, Sacramento County, the other player playing without mask and the children. And we all know that, as mentioned Mr. Papana, you know, when we have a mask, it's hard to go to upstairs. Sometimes you fall in, but when these kids can play, it's hard for them. But I know we follow the guidelines to the county, but if somebody can clear with them, but this is a double signal.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, may I? So what Director Solis and I will do is we will take these comments and commit them to writing. Director Solis will be meeting with his fellow parks directors on Thursday, but I think we probably need to bring this issue directly to the folks at County Health. So Director Solis and I will gather these comments, and particularly we want to talk about the inconsistency and how the entertainment provision is administered. And so we want to have this conversation with the county, and to the folks listening and to the folks watching, we understand, and so we'll pursue this with the county, and we'll come back to the council with a full report, hopefully by the next meeting, and that'll be able to explain the county's position and how we feel about the county's position. We do still have an email out there that was sent to the county, I believe on September 28th, asking for clarity regarding the mask. And so we hope to get a response to that as well.
Okay, Councilman Vandenberg.
Yeah, could you just please inquire about what standard needs to be met before the mask is dropped? You know, so we have a goal to shoot for, or, you know, justification for, to or not to.
Understood.
All right, well, it looks like we have some clear understanding of what we need to look into, and hopefully we can get some sort of clarity on a lot of this inconsistencies, as Mr. Hines phrased it. So do we have any other public comment on this particular item? Hands raised?
We do not have, oh, let me retract that. Yes, we do have a hand raised.
Okay.
Pete, go ahead and unmute your mic and.
Pete, please state your name for the record, and you have 5 minutes.
Yeah, it won't take me 5 minutes, Sean. My name is Pete. My last name's Leisha. I'm very much on the same course as the other gentleman for, you know, the sports that are going on. As I sit here and watch Major League Baseball playoff game, the Los Angeles Dodgers playing in the state of California, nobody's wearing a mask there. No player on the bench has masks on, but yet we ask our youth to do this. Something's wrong. I'm just telling you, something's wrong, and we need to let our youth be able to have some sports activities the way sports should be played. Major league players that are making multi-millions of dollars playing the game don't have to, but yet we'll make a 12-year-old child. That's all I got to say. Please look into it. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. And we are going to do just that. And I assure you that whatever information that comes back, we will definitely hold them accountable to these standards.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Any additional hands raised online, Rose?
We do not have any more hands raised online.
Okay. All right, with that, we will move on to our next item, which is going to be item H2, the Carillion Boulevard traffic analysis. Mr. Hines?
Yes, so while either Mark Clarkson or Director Mike Selling is queuing up the PowerPoint for the presentation, I wanted to just sort of introduce this and let the council know that this is a continuation of a discussion that we've had back in, that started actually prior to my arrival here. This started during spring of 2020. And the last discussion we had about Carilion was on June 15th, that particular council meeting. We're at that point in time where we had let council know that we will keep monitoring Carilion as the developments and as housing options expand in that area and as demand on Carilion grows. And so this is a continuation of that discussion. The vice mayor has brought forth a request for the Vaxhall intersection. But what we've decided to do, in addition to addressing Vaxhall, is to just provide general education on Carilion, where stop signs are warranted. As mentioned when we did the June 15th meeting, we have a toolbox or a toolkit of intersection improvements that we told council that we would analyze whenever we brought an issue back concerning any of the intersections at Carilion. And so you'll find the results of that toolkit the toolkit is described on page 2 of 5 of the staff report. And the review of the data on Carilion starts on page 3 of 5. The actual analysis of our toolkit starts on page 4 of 5, where we go through the various mechanisms for traffic control, crosswalks, flashing beacons, stop signs, roundabouts, and traffic signals, and basically take the council and the public through our analysis of each of those toolkits and how they apply on Carilion right now. So I'm going to turn this over to Director Selling and Mark Clarkson to take you through the PowerPoint. We welcome your questions during and after the presentation. And so, Mr. Selling, can you take it away, sir?
Yeah, good evening, Mayor and council members. So as the city manager just articulated, we'll be going through the analysis. Mr. Clarkson will be providing the presentation, and then he and I will be available for questions thereafter. I'll be running the PowerPoint, and so with that, Clarkson, take it away.
Hi, Mayor. Hi, City Council. This is Mark Clarkson, City Engineer. A few months ago, I had heard that there was a petition had gone around and regarding a stop sign to be installed on Carilion at Vauxhall. And after talking with the CM and the director, Mike Selling, we went ahead and we did our normal review that we do whenever we get comments coming in. We take it really serious, and even though there may be intersections that I drive through every day, if anybody has a comment on it that comes into us, we will go out and do a site review, site distance review. We'll look at multiple items out there way before we even come up with a conclusion of what we think that might happen out there, because we know things can change. So we approached it the same way with staff, and myself went out there and spent a lot of hours out there on Carilion, and also doing each of the intersections, but also reviewing the recent GHD data that they had for traffic and analysis. We had accident data that we received, and other data that we had internal to us that has happened over the years since I've been the city engineer. First, our next slide, please, Michael. So I went back as far as saying, how did this road come about? And it's, it was going to serve the city. If you look at the map off to the right, it was going to connect into the northern part of the city that's outside of our city limits right now. That was originally in the general plan area. It was going to go down and tie into the A Street at the Galt interchange. And it was going to be a major arterial. So they designed it that way. So when you look at the speeds, you look at the intersections, the width of the lanes, sight distance, you look at all of that. The Carillion that's where it was designed, and that's how it's been since it's been constructed over a period of years. Next slide, please. So I looked at existing traffic conditions. GHD did a pretty good comprehensive review of the existing traffic. They also did traffic modeling, but I'm only concerned with what's going on right now. We looked at their data, and most of this stuff was their data that I just reviewed. But then when you get into in 2018, I did a speed study out there, and the 85 percentile was about 44 miles an hour. We also reviewed since 2018, we reviewed all the accident data out there. And what I do want to comment on, if I may, on the accidents, a little more than half of the accidents happened at Carillion and Twin Cities, and the other half were basically at Walnut and Carillion. And those were people running stoplights, running stop signs, rear-ending, and that was about half of them. We had another half dozen or so at Lake Park, where people were trying to enter into a driveway across from Lake Park into the driveway of a shopping center, and not yielding. And then the others were just miscellaneous, a vehicle repair problem, people hitting something and running and leaving the scene, and a few other things like that. But a lot of the intersections didn't have any accidents recorded, and there were no accidents reported between vehicles and pedestrians and bicycles in this period. The other thing that I noticed, or that I just want to bring up on Lake Park, is that we have worked with the developer right across the street from where Lake Park comes into Carillion, and we're realigning that driveway. So the construction's going on right now. They're doing grading out there and undergrounding, and that whole driveway is going to be aligned right. They worked with we required them to work with the shopping center owners and to realign it so we have a nice straight alignment. And that should probably take care of any of the minor accidents that have occurred in the last several years out in that area. And then I list the intersection controls. Next slide, please. So looking at how pedestrians and bicyclists get around, that we have through some lists in there. One of the things that it's hard to do is to count bicyclists and pedestrians. Can't put out, you can't put out the hoses out there and check them. So what we did is we started searching. We found a company to provide the right cameras for us, because we're going to install cameras. We purchased a camera, found out how to return it because it didn't match what our IT department needed, and it didn't match with our system. So we ordered another camera. We actually got it up and working last week, but a chip failed in it, so we had to do a repair, and it was up on Monday. And we finally were getting data, but we only have a 24 hours so far, and that's at Vauxhall and Carillion. And there we'll be able to count the pedestrians, we'll be able to count a bicyclist, and come up with a good number there. We're going to continue that over the next several weeks throughout several of the intersections there. It'll probably take us a month and a half or so. And we have to do it primarily, we look at data between Tuesdays and Thursdays when school is on, daylight hours generally, because that's when most of the peds and the bicyclists occur. But we did have two bicyclists on film in a 24-hour period that came across Carillion at Vauxhall. And they were riding together. They look like a brother and sister. Anyway, next slide, please. So looking at what we can do right now, since we don't have anything that we that can meet anywhere near the different types of warrants that we have, given different types of percentages, decreases and such, we're pretty far away from it in the intersections that only have the minor street being controlled. The minor streets being like Vauxhall and Lake Park and Elk Hills and so forth. The major street is Carillion here at this point. But anyway, so we look at there's ways to kind of slow people down, and that's given them a visual relief of some type that makes them think that they have less room, or they have you know, they have to slow down so they can visually see what's going on. Restriping is one of those that you get travel lane widths a little smaller. You've seen the bulb outs around. We're not recommending them here at this point, but that is a, you know, that's another effect. Doing more landscape bulb outs and stuff like that are usually pretty key in slowing down traffic when you really want to get them down to 20, 25 miles an hour. Then if we restripe Carillion, we have a chance to widen the bike lanes a little bit. And when you look at the bike lanes we have right now, that gutter pan is just a horrible mess for anybody trying to ride on that. So they'll ride up on the pavement, and that puts them right next to the through traffic. And unless you're really experienced bike rider, you're probably not going to ride out that way. So we have an opportunity potentially to widen the bike lanes. We also have radar speed signs that are potential that can help. They've made some really nice improvements to them over the years. They'll collect data. They'll do different flashing signals. They'll do all different types of things. And the ones like on the trailer I show in the picture, I was there for over 45 minutes trying to get somebody to go over 45 miles an hour. And that's the fastest speed I could get right there during that time. And that was in a morning commute. But sometimes people will be immune to it if they see it all the time. And so we do look at, probably if we go that route with radar speed signs, we would move them around occasionally. Next slide, please. So as I indicated, we're going to continue to review out here. We're going to put up our camera. We're going to take counts. We're going to see if there's any anomalies out there that haven't been captured before. If we do any improvements like restriping, we will do a new survey several months after that occurs to see what happens at that time. And then we're just going to continue to monitor, you know, at the uncontrolled minor streets and see what is occurring and what we can do at that time. Next slide, please. One of the things that I do want to point out is that there is, in our budget this year, the council did approve money for Carillion, for work on Carillion. So we already have money available if the council chooses to work in that direction. And otherwise, this picture right here, I got a hero. And that hero is that guy to the right who's got the boxes about 8 feet above his head. That's my hero. I want a bicycle like that. Probably do that sometime when I retire. Anyway, any questions?
So City Engineer Clarkson, there was one thing that perhaps Director Solis can add about the landscaping around the intersection.
Yeah, well, I'll mention it for him. They've done a terrific job out there. We went out when we first heard of the potential issues out at Vauxhall. Mike and myself went out. We did site distance looking at it. We actually had Parks, and they did a terrific job moving a lot of vegetation, cutting it back. The vegetation slowly grows and it gets trimmed, and people like it really nice. And then we realize, oh, maybe it's a little overgrown, and we cut it back. And the Parks Department had done a terrific job on seeing the on cutting back to the site distance requirements that we need out there. They've done a terrific job.
Thank you.
So could you minimize the PowerPoint there, just because I can't see everybody. Thank you. Appreciate that. So what I'd like to do here is, I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of discussion. So to make sure everybody gets a chance to speak and not take up too much time, I'd like to ask if we'll go around and let each council member, I'll ask if you each have comments or questions for Mr. Clarkson or Mr. Selling. And maybe if you do have a lot of comments or anything, maybe we could break it up, because I will circle around and give everybody multiple opportunities to speak. But I want to make sure everybody gets a chance and we don't go too long on each thing. So I'll go ahead and start this off by just mentioning one quick thing. And I just want to say thanks for bringing this forward to staff, because traffic concerns of all sorts, speeding, crosswalk safety, pedestrian safety, you name it, have probably been the number one complaint that I receive from citizens since I've been on the council. Number two would probably be landscaping stuff, but so this is an important issue, and I'm glad to finally have it here to discuss things in depth. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and let somebody go first. So does anybody want to put their hand up and start it off here with any comments or questions? Mr. Papineau, go ahead.
So I did come up with one question actually while you were speaking, Mr. Clarkson. You mentioned the speed signs collect data. Can you go into that a little bit further if you're able, as to what kind of data they collect and how that might help us?
Yeah, some of the newer signs now have data where they can count the cars coming by. They collect all the data for the speeds that are going, and you can download that and you can come up with, different things, different hours of the day. It'll go 24 hours a day, and it just continues to count and do speeds on vehicles. And I don't know, I haven't seen one that has a camera on it yet. I'm sure they probably do. But you would need a camera to determine if the vehicle is a pickup or a car or something like that. But otherwise, they have good data. They're not being used for doing speed surveys. But what they can do is show us where there may be a potential for a speed survey being needed. And then that way we can put out our hoses and camera and go from there to get better data. So it's a 24-hour collection of data that's terrific.
Great, thank you. Other observations that came to me in anticipation of this discussion, and actually post 2 weeks ago, is, if you all may have seen in the news what finally came out in Sacramento about their incident on Freeport, which was basically what appears to be a haphazard change to a crosswalk. And the pedestrians still believed they had the safety, but they weren't protected. And Sacramento paid out $11 million some time ago, 2018. It just happened to come to light now because somebody dug it up. So I appreciate our engineers and work, because before we move forward with changing any of our controls, we do have to, this is the world we live in, be careful that we're not ending up doing something haphazard and putting ourselves in that position. So that's all I have for now.
All right, thank you, sir. I don't see any hands raised, so I'll ask a couple questions. If another council has a comment, so just raise your hand, I'll let you go. I had a couple questions for Mr. Clarkson. So I just want to clarify the data on the traffic study for Carillion was 4,500 to 7,000 cars per day. I'm assuming that was from that was all from the 2018 traffic survey that was done, right? All that data was from the same study?
Correct. Correct. You have more traffic up by Twin Cities, and it goes less as you go down towards Simahorn.
Okay.
So the lower number is at Vauxhall, the higher number is at Twin Cities.
Okay. So I will say, just for all transparency, I don't live on the east side of town. And so although I do travel that area, from time to time, I kind of, with preceding this discussion, I want to kind of go over there and kind of take a look at things. So I went over and spent about an hour over on Crillian today. I spent about 45 minutes sitting at the intersection of Lake Canyon and Crillian at the intersection around 3 o'clock, about 2:45 to about 3:30 around school time. I was just kind of trying to get an idea of the amount of pedestrian traffic and cars and things. And then I did spend some time traversing past Vauxhall, kind of taking a look at that. And I think it is important to mention that I think that each of the intersections that have been brought up are not really being brought up with the same concerns. And what I mean is, like, Lake Canyon, I think for me is more of a pedestrian concern because it's a highly used crosswalk. You have the park, you have the school down the street. Elk Hills is kind of the same way with McCaffrey down the street, but with Lake Canyon, I feel like that's one that I've heard a lot of complaints about, where there's a concern from citizens. I know that there hasn't been anybody hit or killed in that crosswalk, but I think the concern there is not so much auto related as it's more pedestrian safety. Whereas something like Vauxhall, I don't think Vauxhall is probably going to be a highly traveled crosswalk. I mean, I could be wrong, but I think that is more of a traffic safety, because those of you that have traveled Vauxhall, if you're going southbound, especially, is what I think the dangerous direction. You kind of come over this rise, and I don't know the angle of the degree of the street, but you kind of come over, and I did it like 3 times at like 45, right at 45, the speed limit. And you come over, you can't see the crosswalk at all. It's like you can't see the angle of visibility. There's nothing. There is 2 crosswalk signs. They're not lighted. They're just the yellow metal signs that's indicate a crosswalk. But what I did notice on the one going southbound, that it is blocked by a tree. You can't see it till it's almost right next to you. So that would be important to note that. But what I think the concern here is not so much people, but people trying to pull out from Vauxhall. You come over that rise and you're just right there. And I think, what I've heard from citizens is that they have to kind of creep out and kind of watch people come flying over that rise. And even if you're doing the speed limit, which I don't dispute the traffic study at 44. I mean, if you did a traffic study today, 3 years later, it's probably going to be maybe the same. Maybe it's going to be 45, but I don't think it's going to be like significantly higher from 2018. So, but I think, again, what I'm stating here is I think that there's just a concern with a traffic collision risk at that intersection, because it seems like the visibility is poor compared to something like Lake Canyon or Elk Hills, where I think the visibility is much better because it's a straight on, but there is a lot of more chance for pedestrian activity, and especially with children. So I just wanted to state that we're not talking about, apples and apples with every intersection here. I think we need to look at them, think about each one individually. So does any of the council want to speak? Vice Mayor Sandu, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Hines and your staff. Spent a lot of time a couple of weeks ago on this issue, and then also in a detailed report you're giving us. We all know, the Crillian Boulevard a couple of years ago, the staff want to make all 11 roundabout, and they want to be master plan. On June 15, 2021, council rejected that, and council asked the staff to individual if there is anything individual in the future. And this, I have 2 concerns. One is on Vauxhall and the other on a Lake Canyon. The citizen asked, and since I'm living on that corridor, I travel every day. On the report, one thing I'm not agree with that is that all the intersections are currently operating safe and efficiently. This is not true. And the other thing I see on the report, something they mentioned, there may be there is a roundabout is safe. But we already mentioned on June 15, 2021. The other thing is this is the citizen, they living around this corridor. And then they mentioned, they said, with this, Carillion Boulevard has become a race for many drivers. Mr. Clarkson, he said he went over there, he watched for 45 minutes, he don't catch nobody going over 45. That might be a very good time. And, you know, especially when the people going from Vantage or going to the south, you know, there is nothing till Simmerhorn. And I certainly, there can be a, you know, the driver are speeding. The residents over there, they have a concern. They said when they travel, walking, bike path, local residents, the blind corner. I was talking about these the citizen, they ask, they know that, they know that, and I already know that there is no the traffic does not can be justified anything doing on a Vauxhall. But there is a structure of the road, slope, blind spot. That's usually affect. You know, unfortunately, there is no big accident. But when car going 45 or 50 mile an hour, if there is an accident happen, this not can be a benefit. This can be a fatality. So my job is to use a preventable action. If something is not, I know there is a report, it say if there is a 5 accident happen, then it's a stop sign. But my opinion is wrong. We want to do something when 5% get killed. That's not the right way to do. And I'm agree with the engineering report. Mr. Clarkson, he's a very experienced person. But my concern is in those both intersection, Lake Canyon and Vauxhall. You know, when the normal citizen asks, they think there might be a stop sign is reasonable, but we need to study whatever we need to do. There is a on Vauxhall, there will be, if we don't take any action, there will be something happen on a Lake Canyon. I don't know what study, but this study was done in 2018, Mr. Clarkson. That's for 4,500 and 7,000, right?
Correct.
And that, you know, on the 4 lane, 5,000 to 40,000, it should be, you know, it's like in 4 lines, right? And when that study done, when we have that stop sign on the Vantage Oak and Carillion, you know, there is stop sign, I think on back in 2017 or 2016 on Vantage Oak and Carillion.
Yes, that one, that Vintage Oak and Vintage Oak / Ambrosia on Carillion, that 4-way stop was developed through when Elliott Holmes, I believe it was 3C, when they came before the Planning Commission, they did a traffic study and it showed that that intersection would need a stop sign with their traffic coming on board and also with the additional developments that were scheduled in that time back. It started in, I think their report was done in 2015. And so when I came on board, they hadn't started grading yet. And but the stop sign was put in because it was required by the conditions of their map approval to put in a 4-way stop based on the traffic study that was completed and accepted by the city council at that time.
But the study, what's mean by 3C? Could you a little bit explain to me 3C study, traffic study? It is same thing, they count the traffic, how many cars going, or they're doing a different way?
No, they follow the engineering requirements. They had a traffic firm that did a traffic study out there. They also did a modeling. What would happen when River Oaks developed all the way out to Marengo, and when other subdivisions out there developed, then that it showed that requirement of Vintage Oak was going to need to be a fully controlled intersection. And so that was conditioned on their maps to install that at their cost. And that's what occurred with that one.
So that's been the engineering report. They include, I believe, all the east side development, and they also include the Liberty Ranch. Even their Liberty Ranch, that new subdivision over there is not even start anything yet. And that's why they come as that stop sign bit or threshold. And did you have that report in your office? I just want to see what was that time when you put a stop sign, and what was the traffic count, because we want to make sure the traffic count should be lowered so we don't have any lawsuit, right? Because these east side is developed after a 4 year, and the Liberty Ranch even don't start yet.
The parameters that they were given at that time was before I was city engineer, but I know that I'm not making an excuse for that. It's just what you have is you had development that was coming on. They performed their plan, their traffic study as they were directed to by staff at that time, and then they were given, it showed that intersection needed to be controlled. And so that the city council adopted their conditions, which one of their many conditions was to put in the control at Vintage Oak.
Okay, I do understand the city council might be adopted. We don't know with the threshold to be met on that Vintage Oak or not.
Yeah, it's when you're doing a future development, they work off of models, and they try to predict what's going to happen with the flows with different development going on, and they come up with it. They don't have the actual counts, didn't warrant it, but it was their model that said once their homes are in place, once this level of activity occurs, it's going to be needed. That's when they're looking at the impacts that the developments do. And they look at all types of things, pedestrian impacts and vehicle impacts and school impacts. They look at all of that. And these are all models that they utilize in order to determine what their impacts are. And then they have to mitigate their impacts. And part of that mitigation on the traffic was to do the controlled intersection at Vintage Oak.
Okay, and then the same scenario on a Vauxhall, the notch, all that notch area, it can be in city limit. And we don't know when it can be all going to develop, and it can be impact on the traffic, right?
And you are correct on that. And when plans start coming in, when tentative maps start coming to us from those subdivisions, or potential subdivisions, that's when we'll look at what their impacts are. We'll require all types. Planning usually takes the lead on this. Requires all types of environmental documents and impact reports, and to see what their impacts are. And studies will be done in that area. Models will be performed in, on Carillion, on Marengo, and wherever else, whatever development occurs at that time. And that's when we can see what impacts are being predicted, and then what mitigation we have to do to have the developer mitigate those impacts.
Okay, so that means some of the stop signs, we put them in before even all the development come in, before all the threshold. And what's the threshold in order to have a stop sign?
Well, there's a multitude of warrants. If you're looking at changing something that is existing right now. There's a series of warrants that we review that's in the MUTCD, that's municipal codes. That's also Caltrans codes that they have. And so we follow what the warrants are there. And it's similar to when a developer is coming on and they're doing a model. The numbers that they develop with the model they'll compare them to the different warrants for controlled intersections and such like that. And so it's just, they're held two different ways. One is existing conditions with the warrants, and then a model with the warrants. With the notch coming in, I don't know what their impacts are going to be without seeing a model on their traffic of how what's going to occur to Carilion. And I think with the notch coming in, that's when Carilion gets tied into the Galt interchange. So that's going to have an impact on Carilion. There's no doubt there.
Thank you, Mr. Clarkson. I'm going to let the other people have a question. I will come back.
Right.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Vice Mayor. Mr. Vandenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. On the traffic studies, if people were to call in all the time and complain, that would be counted as part of the problem or the numbers?
No, well, that can get things started to be looking out there. People call in and they talk about, whether it's pedestrian crossing or traffic driven, we go out there and we'll do a full review of whatever they're looking at. We'll go from one end to the other, and we take our time on it. But as far as when you're looking at warrants or you're looking at making changes, yeah, the customers who are using it are the ones who can help direct, the future of that roadway. Like Carilion, I mean, one of the things that planning came through, and that, as it was already mentioned, a whole series of roundabouts up and down Carilion in the millions of dollars range. But the intent of that, it was an extreme attempt, but the attempt of what they were trying to do is to make it a multimodal, to where bicycles can be riding on a lane of road, and you squeeze down the traffic and you slow down the traffic, and that was an extreme case. But that's a vision that you can have with a road. If the road isn't doing what you want it to do, and it's not either meeting the conditions, as having as much traffic as you want on it, or it's having too high of speeds, there's things you can do to turn it into the road that you want it to be. And as I indicated, the roundabouts are a terrific way of slowing people down, but then you're changing what you want the road to do. And so the customers and city council can determine what they want each of these roads, to look like. When you look at Old Town, years ago, when they came out and they did the beautification and they did the bulb outs and they did the stuff at that time, that's what the city council envisioned, changing an ordinary street in a business area and doing what they did with it, which helped slow down the traffic, help change the way the road is used. So we do have that, I mean, the council, is the ones that provide direction on how we're going to view the road.
So you mentioned no one would drive faster than 45 with the cart out there. And then you also mentioned that the 80 percentile was 44 miles per hour. So I don't see how those two jive really. Just making that point, don't really need an answer. I wanted to also mention that Lake Canyon Avenue is supposed to have a lighted crosswalk, but none of the lights in the roadway function. They haven't functioned for a long time. I shouldn't say that. They haven't functioned for a while, though. It's fair to mention out. When the Carilion Boulevard master plan was presented to us, it was perfectly fine to have 11 roundabouts, perfectly fine to have 11 stop signs, perfectly fine to have 11 stop lights if we so choose. Nobody brought any of these concerns that we're discussing in this meeting or the previous meeting. And now suddenly everybody's, running sirens about what we should, could, and can't do. But as long as the state wants it, it's fine. So to me, it's more just about justifying the engineering necessities as an engineer sees fit. And on that road where at Vauxhall, there's a downslope. I've been through there. It is a bit of a challenge. It's one of the easier places to make a mistake. Let's put it that way. The road also narrows there. So if people feel like they're going to get cut off by a slower vehicle, they're going to want to, I would think they would want to speed there. Also, the Carillion Boulevard Master Plan, much of that was touted as taking care of future problems. I don't see why that doesn't apply now. It's the same road, same city, same future, so I don't know why we can't. Those seem to be plenty of justifications to me, engineering justifications to put a stop sign and a lighted crosswalk, just like Lake Canyon. Personally, I'd like to see the entire road restriped with the lanes being on the narrow side, bike lanes bigger with the green. I think the green, I don't like the big, long, giant stripes of green, but I think the green helps people see the bike lanes more and that will help slow people down. I think if we installed 2 stop signs, full stop signs, there wouldn't be such a long runway down Carillion Boulevard. That would, and I bet if you put in 2 stop signs, put in the lighted speed indicators, let it go for a couple months, and then did a study, you'd find that everybody slowed down. Because I think you ought to drop the speed limit as well. All those things should happen. I think you just mentioned that, we're here to the Carillion Boulevard Master Plan was fine to do as the council wanted, and that's kind of what I'm asking. And that's all I have.
May I mention something on this is Clarkson. When you look at the master plan, they were looking at the traffic. They were comparing to what the traffic would be there in 20 years from now at build out. And so that's what they were looking at is you're going to have traffic in the 10, 15,000 car range. And the discussion there was to try to get less vehicles coming down Carillion and moving them over towards Marengo. So it was a little different thing because they were looking at 20 years down the road, what the traffic's going to look like right now. And so that's kind of the different here. We're looking at what's existing there. And if we're going to change something, then, like if we're going to put bulb outs out there, in certain areas, then we would do some modeling and, we would do a full engineering analysis on the impacts of what that would have. And then we can adjust things accordingly, with existing conditions. But what they were looking at is 20 years out.
And that was exactly my point.
Yeah.
You're making my point, quite frankly. And, on Marengo, there's been a lot of complaints about people racing and people actually crashing into cement walls, protecting homes. Thank God for the cement wall, but they're, destroying cars and walls. And the lady that complained had 3 accidents inside of a year or close to accidents. And then one last point. Someone mentioned to me that the SAC-B had an article today. I didn't have a chance to read it, but it was something about speed lumps that allow emergency vehicles to pass through at the same time, preventing cars from driving excessive speed. So please look into that. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. I was going to go next, but I saw Rich raise his hand, and since he hasn't spoken yet, I'm going to go ahead and let you go next. Rich, go ahead.
I'll be fast. I was just wondering if there was any public comment. I'd like to hear public comment before I have a couple of questions to ask.
Sure, we can do that. I can go ahead and open the public comment. We can keep it open while the council is discussing. If you are watching and would like to raise your hand and make a comment, you may do so. If you are on the phone, you can press *9 and that will raise your hand. Do we have any hands raised currently, Rose?
We do have one hand raised, Mr. Sauter. Go ahead and unmute your mic and you have 5 minutes.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you to the city staff for putting this report together. I just wanted to make a couple of points on some of this. I happen to live off Vauxhall, and Carilion is my backyard. So honestly, the thought of a stop sign at Vauxhall doesn't really excite me, because then that means I'm going to hear cars idling and taking off from that stop sign. I also don't really have as much of an issue traversing the hill. You know, you can, if you pay attention, either driving down Carilion or making your turn out of Vauxhall, you're able to navigate it pretty well. I would like to comment about the speed lumps. Carilion's an arterial. It's a major arterial, so speed lumps are designed for residential areas. So I wouldn't see that as an alternative. And I also don't want to see us use stop signs as speed control. So certainly setting up citizens to potentially, have Carilion be a stop sign every 500 feet or at every intersection, when it's not justified by the traffic surveys or the traffic studies, that means people are stopping for really no reason at all. So I just want to make sure that I kind of like the idea of maybe restriping it, because I think it does need to be improved for biking. But I think what Mr. Selling said about the original intent of that road, it's got no driveways, it's got no houses on it. It's the way to get from Twin Cities to the south part of town. And those of us that live on Vauxhall, we have to go all the way down Carilion. And I would rather not be doing it at 25 miles an hour and stopping every 5 feet. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Jerry.
Thank you.
Do we have any additional hands raised online?
We do have another hand. We have Predeep Burke.
Okay.
Predeep, go ahead and unmute your mic, and you have 5 minutes.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good evening, Mayor and Council. I just had a few comments about Carilion and Vauxhall. When was the study done? Was it in recent year and a half during COVID? Was it when school was out for most of the year and most citizens were working from home? If so, I don't think the survey that was done shows accurate, or should I say realistic, results. For Vauxhall in particular, in the morning, it is very hard to make it out of Vauxhall because there's a lot of traffic for those going to drop off their kids and those going to work to get on 99. You literally have to peek out past the stop lines to be able to see oncoming traffic, especially because of the humps and the lanes narrowing. Those vehicles are usually coming pretty fast because there is no traffic control until Simmerhorn and Vintage Oak. Also, when citizens see a speed reader, they usually tend to slow down by just the sight of it. In addition, keep in mind that as more rooftops are coming to Galt, so are more cars and traffic. Does this traffic study take into account future housing developments in the area, or do you need to wait until those start to take that into account? As our lives are somewhat going back to normal, many of us are still working from home. I strongly believe this area needs to be reassessed or looked into further to see what we can do to make our streets safer. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you, Predeep.
Any additional hands, Rose?
There are no hands
Okay.
online.
I had a few more questions. And so, Mr. Clarkson, I was thinking about what you were saying about the stop sign at the Vintage Oak and Ambrosio. So it would be fair to say that stop sign wasn't really installed because of the conditions of a particular road survey. It was installed because of the condition of the Elliott homes being added in that area and the potential. That's if I heard that correct.
Yeah, it's from the homes being developed there, along with their traffic study that showed that it was going to be needed.
Okay. And would it be fair to say the same thing would apply to the stop sign at Elk Hills and Walnut, the one across from the fire station? Because I know that we had discussed that particular stop sign at great length years back. And remember the warrants never really kind of justifying it. But then when Veranda went in, then I think that was also a condition of that project. Is that also similar?
Correct. That was done by traffic studies that they were required to do at that time for their, and then they were required to, they showed that there was going to be a warrant, meeting warrants at that intersection with their development coming in. And so they were required to do that.
Okay. So if or based on that, well, we don't know because you haven't done a study recently, but based on the 2018 study that you did, which included the entire length of Carillion along with Vintage Oak. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that study did not, and probably be safe to assume if you did another study that it would probably be fairly consistent, showing that Vintage Oak, that particular intersection, according to the 2018 survey that we've been presented tonight, did not meet warrants for a stop sign based on that study.
Well, that study didn't include pedestrians. There was a lot of things that weren't included in that. I mean, in the 218, they didn't do a pedestrian count. And that's why I went out and the city purchased a camera so we could start doing pedestrian counts.
Because Vintage Oak, because that stop sign was based on contingencies of the Elliott development, not based on a traffic study, like similar to the traffic study that was done on the entire length of Carillion, the one that was presented to us tonight, right?
No, they did a traffic model that showed the impacts of their development, what would occur at that intersection.
Okay.
And then their impacts warned, showed that it was going to meet warrants to have that for a requirement of having a controlled intersection.
Okay, so it didn't meet, so it was based on a model and not a trap. It's a different parameters were applied. I have a question for Mr. Hoffman, if you're there. Mr. Hoffman, do you know roughly off the top of your head how many houses went in on the Elliott development that I was just referring to that came in over there between Marengo and, do you recall?
I mean, the entire thing, you're talking about everything south of
the newer version, the newer homes that came in after 2017. Was it like 150, 200?
that entire development, I think is at least 200. And then if you were to say, what new development has taken place after the Carillion Boulevard study, it would be the 60 houses that were built at Veranda that are currently under construction.
And how many, Mr. Hoffman, how many residents is there at Parlin Oaks, the development on the corner of Carillion and Walnut that's being developed right now?
Right off the bat, that'll be 144 homes. And usually our general plan identifies that a house is having, I think, 3.2 residents per unit.
Okay, so 100, and then how many apartments? 83?
There's 80.
Okay, so roughly 220-ish.
Yeah.
Right. So what I'm wondering is, it seems to me that if we're able to justify putting stop signs in at places like Vintage Oak or at Elk Hills, based on a model that is projecting the supposed future of what traffic could be for developments, then why are we not using that same criteria to analyze Vauxhall or Lake Canyon when we have 220, dwelling units going in on the corner of Carillion and Walnut? We just had 60 going at Veranda. I mean, that's a lot of development, not including the Greenwood cottages. You have to assume that a lot of people from Parlin Oaks are going to be traversing northbound to get over to Twin Cities to go to places like Walmart or Rayleigh's or any of those. And definitely Greenwood Cottage would be, but that one's close. Veranda probably as well. Veranda people definitely probably going to be traversing northbound through Lake Canyon intersection, through Elk Hills. So I'm just kind of struggling with the fact that I'm seeing traffic studies tonight that are showing us that don't really justify us doing any kind of controls at these intersections, but yet we had no problem doing those such controls when it was a contingency of a development. And I understand it was a different analysis, but I think I think it's fair to, it's like a double standard in my opinion. I just struggle with the thought that, I mean, if we ran the same traffic, well, we did. I mean, the same traffic study from 2018 that shows that Vauxhall and Lake Canyon don't really meet a certain criteria to require a stop sign or controls. The same thing would apply today to Vintage Oak. That same traffic study shows the same thing for Vintage Oak, but yet a stop sign exists there.
Well, I'd have to defer to Mr. Clarkson.
Yeah,
I think
that wasn't a question for you, Mr. Halpin. You answered my question on the housing. I'm going to let Mr. Lozano go. Go ahead, sir.
I think Mr. Selling had a response for that, or he had his hand up.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I can understand how, Mayor, how you can, feel like it's kind of a double standard. The thing is, when you have an existing intersection, like some of the ones that you're talking about, if there is no development that's coming in, that we can basically, through their traffic analysis, and when a development is proposed and we look at the tentative map and determine, what the traffic study needs to look at, the consultant, the traffic expert will look at it. They'll run through the model and determine where the trips are likely to go based on the existing road network and what's proposed for the development. And so they run that into the model based on, like you were just asking, the number of homes and whatnot. And there are it's approximately, as I recall, around 10 trips a day per home, basically, is what the traffic generation is. It's kind of a rule of thumb. That's not exact, but anyway, that's what it is. So they will run that through the model, and based on their model analysis, they look at it, refine it, does it make sense? They also will send their draft analysis to us as the city engineers. We review it likewise to ensure that does it make engineering sense? Does that make sense where the traffic's going? I.e., if the model is showing something that looks out of whack, they're sending, a percentage of the traffic generation from that development onto a road where there's no, destination, if you will, or attraction, whether it's a commercial center or an employment center or something like that. That's the kind of stuff that we look for. So it has to make sense, and there is some engineering judgment in that, like I mentioned before in my presentation at the last meeting. So between the consultant running the model and us reviewing it and see what it shows, and if it shows, hey, this development is going to have an impact to some existing intersection, like River Oaks did at Vintage Oak, then that's where it comes in. We review it again. We concur, or the city staff did at the time, with the traffic study that was done through the modeling. But that's the only tool you have when a new development is coming in. Now, at an existing intersection, once it's in, what we have is actual data. We know how many cars, we do counts. We know how many cars or pedestrians or bicyclists are traversing that intersection, and what directions they're traversing it. So we have to go on the actual data in that case. So I can understand why it seems like it's kind of a difference there, maybe unfair, so to speak. But those are the tools that we have based on those two different situations. So I just wanted to hopefully give you some explanation on that.
But Mr. Selling, it was already said that the stop sign at Vintage Oak and at Elk Hills were put in prior to those developments even going in. They were put in anticipation. So was there a model done for Parlin Oaks or Veranda?
I would have to defer back to staff as far as I believe that there were traffic analysis done for both of those as well. So in a case like those two, and as I mentioned at this intersection, Vintage Oak, you're looking at what's the existing traffic, and then you're looking at what is the development's traffic itself. And then they do another scenario, which is called EPAP, which is existing projects plus approved other projects. So like an Eastview Liberty Ranch has to be incorporated too. And that's where, that additional traffic from the modeling, and again, they're looking out because that's the only tool we have. The roads aren't built yet, the homes aren't built yet. We don't know necessarily how many trips they're going to be. So we're relying on the model. And those models are very, very closely calibrated, even at the regional level by like the Council of Governments. So it's a really technical, model, if you will. So it's broken down pretty well. And like I say, these are licensed traffic engineers, not just civil engineers that are doing this. And so setting it up. And so that's what they go off of.
Okay. Well, this is not so much a question as more of a just a thought. So if we have 200, if we have 160 homes and 80 apartments going up Parlin Oaks, which is 240, and we had 60 going at Veranda, that's 300. So I think it would be fair to say that those 300 residents that will be basically living in those places probably within the next 6 months. Well, maybe Parlin Oaks a little longer, but I think I was told about 6 months last time I asked. It'd be fair to say that any of those people were to go to, say, Rayleigh's or to Walmart or to Rite Aid or Tractor Supply or any of these places, there's a high probability they're going to traverse down Curlian Boulevard. It seems unlikely that based on the 10 trips per household that someone just mentioned, you're looking at 300, that's 3,000. So you're at 3,000 trips added to that corridor. And for me, I just have a hard time believing that those intersections, the one we're concerned about this evening, are not going to be impacted by the development. I'm only looking at this from a projecting, like using a, I'm only looking at this as the same criteria that like Vintage Oak and Elk Hills were looked at is, well, we were projecting these new homes were going to impact. I mean, if you're telling me that 60 homes on Veranda justified going from a report that I saw at the safety committee 4 years ago that says that an Elk Hills and Walnut stop sign by the fire station is not warranted, and 60 homes later, it's warranted. I have a hard time believing that you can't say that 300 homes are not going to make an impact. I'm still struggling with the criteria because again, I think we need to be proactive and not reactive. And I'm not sitting here advocating for stop signs at all these intersections. Don't get me wrong. I'm just trying to understand the justification that we're told, like liability wise. Well, if we put a stop sign in and it doesn't justify by the traffic study, but yet we put stop signs in at these other places, which were not justified by traffic studies. They were justified by some sort of model. But could we or could we not say, if we were to put a stop sign at Lake Canyon and say, well, future projections of 300 homes in the area are going to increase the traffic flow through that corridor by approximately 3,000. So we think it was necessary. I think we have a really strong case there to justify such an addition. So
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to stop my comment there and let somebody else go if they had something to say. But if you want to comment, go ahead.
Well, I would just tell you that those whole 3,000 trips are not all going to go down Carillion. Based on the model, they will be, essentially dispersed according to what the model predicts. So they're not all going to be there. And then that is over the course of a 24-hour period. So they're not all there, at the same time kind of thing. So, and so, with regard to Vintage Oak, I don't know without having to look at the study, but sometimes it is the straw that breaks the camel's back kind of thing. And it just depends without, looking at that specific study. But it is a study, I guess I just want to emphasize. Yes, it is based on a model, but this is, like I said, highly calibrated. So it's not just somebody's kind of like, yeah, I think it's going to be this much here kind of thing. So
I'm not doubting the scientific of. I know I'm not doubting that. I'm just saying that we're being presented with traffic studies this evening to apply to intersections that we're talking about possibly doing some safety measures at, but yet intersections in the past, which are on that same corridor, were used, a different set of measures was applied. And I just think it's kind of apples and oranges.
They're still applying it toward the warrants, as Mr. Clarkson said. So whatever that model, is predicting what the traffic distribution is and what the traffic generation is, it's still being applied against the warrants, the same warrants. So it is an apples to apples.
Let me ask Mr. Clarkson a brief question. In your professional opinion, Mr. Clarkson, if we were to do a traffic study tomorrow on the intersection at Vintage Oak and Carillion, do you think that it would come back meeting the warrants in the same way the traffic study that we're looking at this 2018, if you use the same type of traffic study, do you feel, in your opinion, it would come back and meet the warrants to justify a stop sign based on that criteria?
You have a controlled intersection where people over the years have probably tried to avoid it. They've changed their driving patterns. So to try to compare one, the model with something that is actual, from a model from 5 years ago, different developments happen, different development has not occurred yet. And people, once you control an intersection of full control like that, traffic patterns change.
Right.
They just do. People's habits change. So it's, you just don't make those comparisons. You go out there and you know, you do the best model you can. One of the things that, you know, you're indicating or that, you know, we see and trying to get it clarity is that it is one and the same when we have a development coming in. We may say you need to have a water pipe this size because it's, you know, for your development, you're going to put this much, you know, use this much flow, but it needs to be a little bit bigger because your development's going to feed into this, you know, another development right next door is going to feed into it. So when do we oversize the pipe? Do we wait until the new development comes in? And if, as Mr. Selling said, the straw that breaks the camel's back, when do we tell them, well, you hang on to your money? You know, that's hard to condition that and say, well, in 3 years after all your homes are built, that's when you're, you know, we're going to look at everything and see if that condition is upheld. We can do that, but then the developer would probably want that on multiple items that they have to oversize and that they have to build sooner than is needed. So we are looking at the models are tight. They are tweaked. You know, people review them from all over the place. They go into it and they say, okay, when this development occurs, this is what your traffic is expected to be out there. And then we base the mitigation on that.
Was there, maybe I missed when you said it, Mike. So was there a model done regarding Parlin Oaks that you're aware of?
I believe that there was a traffic study done for Parlin Oaks, yes.
But we don't
Yes,
have
there was a traffic study done on Parlin Oaks.
But we don't have
I had reviewed it. Yeah.
We don't have
I believe that we do have it still, yeah.
Yeah, we keep all that stuff.
Well,
And it didn't show any additional, you know, there are impacts out there. You know, you're generating more cars, but it didn't push any intersections to needing more controls.
But a 60 house veranda project did. I'm just want to understand.
We'd have to look at it to be able to specifically answer that. Yeah.
Yeah, that study happened before I was the city engineer, but you know, it was approved through the planning process, through our process that we review it, and through the city council. So
okay, fair enough. I just want to change gears on a question, something different, and feel free. Other council members want to put their hand up. Feel free to, and I will call on someone.
Mayor, we have a hands raised online.
Okay, let's go ahead and hear a public comment then.
It'd be Bill Forrest. Bill, go ahead and unmute your mic and you have 5 minutes.
Hi, Bill Forrest, Senior Civil Engineer with your Public Works Department. I just wanted to provide a little bit of history, particularly on the veranda, as well as the stop sign at Vintage Oak and Carillion. The stop sign at Vintage Oak and Carillion came about when Elliott was developing their last phase of River Oaks, which was a 70-unit development. But what they wanted to change was the tentative map had a vehicle bridge crossing at Norbury, and they wanted to downsize that to just a pedestrian bicycle bridge. And so with that, we required a traffic analysis. And so what that traffic analysis essentially changed was it changed the subdivision having 4 points of egress with the bridge over at Norbury. It moved it down to 3. So Director Selling had talked about, you know, the model includes distribution modeling. And so what it showed was by going to a pedestrian bicycle bridge at Norbury that pushed a little more traffic out to Ambrosio Vintage Oak Carilion intersection. And essentially the intersection fails in the morning peak hour for the school delivery. For the veranda traffic analysis, it was looked at the Elk Hills and Walnut. That did include anticipated traffic from the Eastview development to the east.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Lozano, go ahead.
Yeah, I have several comments and just a couple of initial questions. First of all, staff, thank you for putting this comprehensive report together. There's a lot of reading and pretty interesting. I picked up a couple of different items that I didn't know before. A couple of questions that I have is, we had a presentation last meeting about the different traffic control devices. And is there a way to go over briefly what we can do to reduce speed? Again, I go back to the complaints of speed are just never ending, quite honestly. And even in the petition, the petitioners talk about Carilion being a raceway. And, from a vehicle, somebody driving a vehicle, if it's a raceway, it's certainly for our pedestrians. And there are a lot of pedestrians on Carilion regularly. So could you go over just the basics of what can we do basically to reduce speed in different areas?
Yeah, so let me kind of start by, just touching on the 85th percentile, and that's, codified in the vehicle code. And basically what that means is that on, normal conditions, dry, sunny, daylight conditions, 85% of the drivers on a given roadway will drive that segment of roadway at what is deemed a comfortable speed. And so by 85% driving at or below that speed, whatever that may be, and that's how we set it. So we do the speed survey, and based on the counts that we get and the speeds that we get, that's what it's based on. And we're allowed within 5 miles an hour, either below or above it. And there's some engineering judgment in that, as I kind of touched on in the prior presentation. Now, what that means also is there's 15% of the traffic is traveling above that speed. How far above that speed can vary dramatically. So regardless of what you set a given roadway speed at, and as posted speed, you set it at within 5 miles an hour of the 85th percentile, there's always going to be 15% of the traffic traveling above that speed. They may be 1 mile an hour above that speed. They may be 15, 20, 30 miles an hour above that speed. So just recognize there's always going to be 15% of the traffic speeding. The other thing is a lot of times people perceive speed inaccurately. And I can tell you in my prior position, we would frequently get complaints of speeding, and we would go out, one of our technicians with a radar gun, and basically, shoot traffic and ask the person, so you think they're speeding or not? And I can tell you probably 9 times out of 10, they would say, oh yeah, that person's going 5 to 10 miles an hour over the speed limit. Well, guess what? They're going like 2 miles an hour over the speed limit, or sometimes they're even at the speed limit. So people's perception of speed can vary dramatically, and it's often inaccurate. And that's why I think maybe the chief might weigh in too, but some of the motor officers, they go through special training in order to accurately judge speed without a radar gun. So we have to keep that in mind too. So there's always going to be speeders, and then there is a serious potential for people misperceiving speed too. So, so anyway, hopefully that answers your question.
I guess the other piece of it really is how do we reduce the speed of cars that are traveling in any particular roadway?
Yeah.
Whether it be an arterial or a residential, because I do get quite a few complaints about residential.
Sure, I'll start, and if Mr. Clarkson wants to jump in, you can feel free. As you probably saw from the staff report, many studies have been done. I mean, traffic engineers or highway engineers are always studying all kinds of aspects of traffic, and so when it comes to speed, it's very strong correlation that the perception of the travel lane and obstacles, fixed objects along the roadway weigh heavily in the driver's at least subconscious as to what's a comfortable speed, as I was just talking about. So when you narrow the lanes, what's been borne out in a lot of these studies is when you narrow the lanes, you get a reduced speed because there's a sense of confinement to the driver. And so that's one of the things that we are proposing here to reduce speeds. The other things, and you have to look at different types of roadways. On an arterial roadway like this, and I think Councilmember Vandenberg was inquiring about speed lumps. And yes, and I think one of the commenters talked about, with Carilion being an arterial road, that is not a solution that we would, and that traffic engineers in general would not recommend for an arterial higher speed roadway like Carilion. It's really meant for more residential lower speed roadways. And the reason is if you hit a speed bump at a higher speed, I think we can all understand that you would have a significant potential to lose control. So what you can do is you can narrow the speeds. Other things like was mentioned, and again, like them or not, roundabouts have been shown to dramatically reduce speeds while still maintaining a reasonable traffic flow. So other things that have been done are things like what they call chicanes, which is essentially a physical narrowing. Sometimes they'll widen out the sidewalk area or the curbing and add kind of, if you will, kind of almost like just a back and forth motion you're going to have to make, kind of a wiggle in the road, if you will. Again, these are typically more lower speed residential type applications for lowering speed. But anyway, I'll stop there. I don't know, Mr. Clarkson, if you have anything to add.
Mr. Clarkson, you muted yourself.
Mike, you were getting some interference from your mic. Can you mute your mic, Mike? Thank you.
Yeah, I just have a quick comment is that when this road, I mean, when you look at the Carilion master plan, it was showing that it costs a lot of money to change the direction of an existing road of what you want. So if we want this road to where people aren't going to go over 35 miles an hour, or say go over 45, we'll just take the 45. We'll say the speed limit, that's it, 45. Then we would have to design elements into it to reduce the speeds down to 35, because you're still going to have a group of people that are going to go well over 35. And so it's going to take a lot of effort and a lot of changes to the road in order to reduce that speed, but it can be done. I mean, it's whatever we want that road to be, we can design it to make it be that road, or design and construct it to be that size. So there's multiple ways, from having a mid center line pedestrian protection islands out there that actually jut into and narrow the vision and narrow the lanes. You have bulb outs for pedestrians. You do a number of things along that whole corridor to help people, or to have people drive safely or feel that that's the speed that they should be driving, which is whatever our intent is. I do want to make a point on one of the legs of the study that was done back in 2018 that we put hoses out there, and that was between Vintage Oak and Walnut Avenue on Carilion. That's a real short section. 85 percentile one direction was 46 miles an hour. So people are picking up speed really fast, even though you have the pedestrian crossings there at the park. You have a stop sign coming up. It was surprising. I thought it would have been lower, but it was 46 in one direction.
But which explains why we get comments from the community about the lights when they're not working for the pedestrians, because apparently the drivers aren't even looking for it.
Yeah,
therefore,
yeah.
that's way fast. I'm not suggesting that we revamp Carillion at all. I just want to make that point. And hey, listen, we have about 60 neighbors in that area that represent probably about 40 houses that are concerned about that intersection, and I understand that, and I just want to figure out what the best way to fix it and make people feel more comfortable there, both pedestrians, bicycles, and quite honestly, I'd be interested to see what those numbers look like when you get the opportunity, because that's an endpoint for a lot of walks for people, or a turnaround point, I should say, is Vauxhall and Carillion, because you get into the county style roads any further south. And so I suspect we'll have quite a few. Now, I just want to go through something because we haven't really touched on it in the council comments. There was information provided by staff today that talked about traffic counts at these different intersections. And it was reported, or at least responded to, that the peak hour of traffic counts, which is the highest hour, going from north to south, was Lake Canyon 238 trips, Elk Hills 217, Oak 343, Vauxhall 53. And I guess my question is this: is that based on the 2018 study? And if that's the case, what do we predict that they would have gone up? Because 2018, the Elliott development that we were talking about, the additional piece of that, of the 70 or 80 houses, about 35 of them were up. So it's about half were fully developed. And so Mike, or can anybody talk to what that might look like today and trying to predict what that might be?
Yeah, I'd hate to try to predict it. I mean, with COVID and some folks teleworking now and whatnot, it's really hard to say what the volumes might be. I know Mayor Farmer mentioned, or asked kind of hypothetically, what would Vintage Oak, would it meet the warrants now? We without doing the analysis, it's hard to say. It might not, because obviously Eastview hasn't built, and it was partly predicated on that. So.
343.
Those were 2018 numbers, and so it would be hard to say what they would look like now without taking into account. So,
if we were to take the 2018 study, though, 343 trips does, and right.
So that's the peak hour, and the warrant. There's a few different warrants. The first one being 300 or more in each of 8 hours. The second warrant drops down to, I forget the numbers now, but I think it's 210 or something like that, and 140 in the minor leg during each of those same 8 hours. So.
Okay. Well, I'm just reading off the response from staff that was sent out to us today, and it says that based on current volumes, the intersection meets the warrant despite Eastview and Liberty Ranch development not having started yet. So if that's our standard, or if that's about what the standard is, I think we're pretty close on a few intersections. And if we can do something in the interim to make them a little more safer for people, I think we should do that. The other thing I wanted to talk about that needs to be out in the public, because we all, again, received this information today, were the 18 traffic collisions in a 3-year period that were documented. Now, I'm not talking about unreported traffic collisions, because I'm sure there's some of those. Some where somebody almost was in a collision. I mean, I'm sure there are quite a few of those as well. But significant enough to where it was reported there were 18 over a 3-year period. Interestingly, and I guess not surprising though, if you think about it, Twin Cities and Lake Park were the highest, right? So, which is that real heavy traffic area where people are coming and going all the time. And then as you move further south, I mean, I was surprised to see there was only 4 at Walnut in the 3-year period, and none, or 1 at Vintage Oak. And so, it's just, I think when you look at the data and you look at what is reality out there and use a little bit of common sense.
You accidentally muted yourself, council member.
So anyhow, I just think that I think it's pretty interesting. Again, I appreciate the input from the community over, through the petition, as well as the 2 that spoke tonight. I do have a bunch more questions, but I think everyone else pretty much covered everything. I would say that, if you're looking at a variety of things, traffic, accidents, speed, I'm sorry, not speed, but traffic volume, accidents and pedestrian issues, you have to kind of consider all of that. And so I think I'm going to end there. Surprisingly, probably shorter than most would have thought. I just think we need to use the right device for the right problem, and whatever that is, let's do what we can to help folks, certainly at the south end of Carilion, feel a little more comfortable leaving their neighborhood. And I want you to know, I mean, there's 40 something houses to the west of Carilion that there's another way out, but it's kind of a long way around. That's their only way out. So I appreciate staff going out and taking the shrubs down. I walk that area regularly, and I don't know that it made a huge difference in the visibility, and made some difference. But I will say that I pulled out of Vauxhall onto Carilion today, coming east from the west side of Carilion, and I was able to see all the way over to the northbound lanes. There's a sign, a pedestrian crossing sign for Chelsea. I was able to see that, and so the visibility is much better than I thought. And so I'll leave it at that. I'd like to hear from the rest of my colleagues.
Well said, Rich. I wanted to comment on what Rich was saying about the citizens' perception of a racetrack. I mean, I can see how, what Mike said too, is that some people's perception of speed is different. And so, but I can see how people would think, I mean, if you have 45 to 7,000 cars, so let's just split that in the middle and say 5 to 7. So it's a little bit higher, but 6,000. If we were to assume that 15% of those cars in the studies, so the 85th percentile was going 44 miles an hour. So if you would say 15 are doing above, but there's a good chance that maybe some of those 15 are going below. So just to be conservative, if we were to take 7%, roughly half of that 15, and times that by 5,000, you got 420 cars. So it would be safe to say, I think conservatively, that probably 400 cars are probably speeding. So it would make sense that residents would say, wow, it's a real racetrack, because if you're witnessing, 400 cars a day, or even 200 for that matter, going 55 miles an hour or 60, or I mean, there's probably some on the speed study, they're probably going 75, at least a handful, that perception would be easy to see. So I just want to state that it's easy to, even though some people watching say, well, if the 85th percentile is 45, how come all these residents act like there's people speeding when there's clearly not? But there is people speeding. It's just not, it's not the 85%. And with that being said, look, Carilion is arterial. I don't dispute there's people speeding on that road, but And would I want to see the speed limit reduced? Well, maybe, but I actually don't think that that's the real problem. I think for me, the real problem is that this is an arterial and it works well for what it's supposed to do. It gets cars from point A to point B, north to south from Cimarron to Twin Cities. So I think it's doing its job well. My issue with Carilion is that it splits the east side, which is the largest residential area of the city of Galt. It basically cuts it right in half. And you have schools, on both sides, actually. So you have people that now have to traverse, children a lot of the times have to traverse this main arterial. And so for me, that's where my focus is. My focus is that I feel like Carilion Boulevard could be safer. And I don't mean safer because of people speeding. I mean safer because of those places where our families and our kids have to cross. So I wanted to point out, so for example, I was taking some notes today driving down. So some of our crosswalks are Lake Canyon, for example. I think, in my opinion, Lake Canyon is one of the most highly used crosswalks. So I was sitting there 45 minutes. I was at Lake Canyon and Carilion today. I actually had a clicker and I was clicking off every time I saw cars go by, and I got about 190 something. So that seems justifiable. You guys said 200 something on the peak hour. So I had like 192 is what I got. And then I had about 60 kids, 60 people crossing in that hour. But the problem is we have lights on the street, and I know I've been told that that system doesn't work well, and the lights that are in the pavement, they haven't worked in a couple of years. It's been, we took Mr. Hines out there when he first came to town. Councilman Vandenberg and I took Mr. Hines out there and showed him that intersection and those crosswalks, and that was when he first came here. And that's been, I don't know, a year. And then I know it hasn't worked for some time before that. So obviously that's a problem. They're not functioning like they're supposed to. And if that's the case, and we have a certain type of system in place and it's not functioning like it should, we need to do something about that. We have a crosswalk at Chelsom that has zero signage. There is no signage at all. The crosswalk is striped, but there's not even a sign, blinking or not, that says there's a crosswalk. There's nothing. There is at Vauxhall, there's fixed signs with no blinking lights. There is blinking lights at Elk Hills, which is another high frequented crosswalk for children. So we have really some inconsistencies, and I know some are used more than others, but what I think really what we're going to need to arrive here is at a compromise. We have citizens that are basically just pleading for us to do something. We have traffic data that's not supporting probably what people are asking for. But we also, I think, all agree that we want our city to be as safe as possible. And we want these people to be safe. And we want them to know that I and the other council members, like Rich mentioned, that we are going to act on their behalf. So I think there needs to be a compromise. And I think, maybe I understand Pandora's box. If everybody that comes forward asks for a stop sign and we just say, okay, let's just divvy out stop signs left and right, then you're going to have 10 more people come and ask for a stop sign the next week. And and they're going to say, well, why can't we have our stop sign? And I understand that. It makes perfect sense. So I think that's where we circle back to, a compromise. And, I've taken a lot of notes today, and I know that this is just a discussion, but this is just my thoughts of what I would like to see, which I think is a fair compromise, would be enhanced crosswalks at every crosswalk that there is on Carilion Boulevard. On the ones like Lake Canyon and Elk Hills and possibly Vauxhall, that we see full lighted controls, LEDs on both sides, with maybe even the little center one that sticks up from the median that has the flashies on that. So there's a halfway point, because it really catches the driver's attention when you come over and you see that. It really kind of catches their eye. Even if they're not flashing, all those controls really kind of catch your eye. At the other intersection, the other crosswalks such as Chelsom or I think there was one more maybe that are not used as much. We at least have really good signage, possibly LEDs on both sides, but maybe not the center median. So, but some much higher level than what we have now. And then possibly at Lake Canyon, I think we should definitely seriously consider a four-way controlled intersection. Today I saw at least 24 cars creep out into the road before they could pull out at Lake Canyon. I saw children walking. I saw a gentleman with his two Dachshund dogs go to cross the road and someone was coming across and they had to lock up the brakes and stop, and he had to pull his dogs back because they almost ran him over. That was in the instant, that was just in the hour that I was there. So I feel that that intersection, because of the high use of the children and the pedestrians, I think that we should consider something there. But again, I'm just, you know, I'm not saying I'm going to dig my heels in and just, you know, say that or nothing. But I also think things like what Rich mentioned, and I think the city manager suggested, is some caution, you know, like coming over that ridge that we talked about at Vauxhall. Maybe as you're coming over that ridge, we have something that says, you know, caution ahead, with a flashing yellow that says danger, you know, danger ahead, or just to kind of catch people's eye that they start being vigilant as they come over that rise. So I think there's some compromise we can get here, but my focus is really just to enhance the maximum safety for people traversing that main arterial. And I think that as these new subdivisions come in, like Parlin Oaks and Veranda and you know, Greenwood Cottages, and you know, and if the other corner across from Parlin Oaks gets developed at some point, I mean, we're gonna have more people traversing that going to school. We're gonna have more kids. We're gonna have more pedestrians, and it's just only going to increase. I think we need to be proactive and not reactive. I'd hate to just say let's wait and see, and then we do have a fatality or a kid get hit. I know we've been lucky, and knock on wood, we haven't had that yet. But I'd hate for that to happen, and I would feel really, really. I don't know if I could really live with that, knowing that I didn't push as hard as I could for some higher safety measures. So these are just ideas I'm throwing out there that I would like to see considered. I would love to hear what my other council members have to say. Rich has your hand up, sir, so go ahead.
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback on that. Listen, I think there's a balance between safety and distracting drivers. So I just want to throw that out there too. And then the other piece is we have to be cognizant of whatever we decide is going to happen at any of these intersections. Quite honestly, we have to decide what is going to be the best for the long term. And you know, I was quite surprised, and you know, I just go back to the data, the traffic collisions, reported traffic collisions, 18 in 3 years. I was expecting 18 a year for 3 years. And, you know, so it's just, and again, I'm up and down Carillion regularly from Lake Park, actually Twin Cities to Vauxhall, many days of the week. And so, anyhow, I just want to throw that out there. I like in the staff report, staff's recommendations about reducing the travel lanes. I think that will do quite well with reducing speeds, and then also maybe some flashing beacons, especially at that hill. Again, I'll have to say, with the recent removal of the vegetation around the Vauxhall area, I was able to see pretty far up. Now I couldn't do it behind the limit line, meaning the crosswalk line. I did have to get out into the crosswalk to be able to see, but I was able to see pretty far up. And again, my experience has been during both daylight hours and before the daylight comes up during the early morning. So I do like staff's recommendation on reducing street lane widths and increasing the bike lane. And I'd also asked a couple of questions regarding reducing the lanes and what width is appropriate. And it sounds like it's 10 feet per lane, and ours are mostly 12 to 13. So anyhow, I just throw that out as a point of discussion. And but I appreciate the interest that folks have taken on Carillion, especially up at the Lake Canyon area where I get complaints pretty regularly. So.
All right, thank you, sir. I believe Jay, you had your hand up next. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just curious. I mean, all the conversation and education is excellent. Is this going to move to some kind of action item at the next meeting or the meeting following? You know, so at some point we have to do something. That's all I have.
Mr. Pappenhau, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I would kind of echo what Mr. Vandenberg said right there, and what Mr. Lozano said, that, I appreciate everybody bringing this forward, appreciate our conversation about it. And I think that the staff's recommendations are a great place to start. I think if those two things are done, they address a lot of what we're talking about and gets us well on our way to making that a safer, better corridor. And then, since this is kind of my wrap up on traffic safety, traffic education month, all this aside, what kind of started this off, as I recall, were some reckless drivers, possibly street racers, crashing into and those are people that don't respect the community. They don't have any regard for any of the things that we're talking about here. And the bottom line with them is, it comes down to enforcement. And the sooner we can get, another traffic officer out and I think possibly get some training for our officers on vehicle equipment, because a lot of those, people that are racing, they don't care about any of this, have those type of vehicles, and those things turn into the sideshows that we hear about. So, we need to focus on this, but we also need to focus on getting the enforcement part where it needs to be. And that's all I have.
Well said. Well said. I totally agree with the enforcement. Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for everybody. All the council members have the same concern, and every council member have a big concern about the citizens, their well. And we do understand that the study does not meet the criteria with the stop sign, but certainly I will move forward to on a Lake Canyon, what staff can do, any kind of stop sign in considering these developments. On Waxhaw, I know there is, that's why I say, even in the last meeting, and even I talked to Mr. Hines when I gave the petition, I know the traffic is not there in order to stop sign, but I will ask Mr. Selling if he can do something to the citizen feel safe, like an engineering judgment, what he's thinking. And I also like to, ask my other council member to direct staff to conduct some additional analysis in-house and propose alternative solution to bring that item as a action. So then we can take a action, all the council members, so it can be have a time when we can done in the future. Mr. Selling.
Yeah, so what I would propose is as recommended in the staff report would be, the thing with traffic is, unless you've got, a clear-cut issue that needs to be addressed, and from our analysis so far, we haven't really seen that other than the speeding, that we would propose to narrow the lanes. And I think with regard to, I guess I want to make clarification out at Lake Canyon, the in-pavement lights, that is on us. We do have it on our list to take those in-pavement lights out because they haven't functioned for a while. But there is what we call a rectangular rapid flashing beacon system in place. And I think what's causing the problem really is people are pushing the button and looking at the in-pavement lights and expecting them to light up, and they're not seeing it. So they're thinking that the system is not functioning, but actually the rapid flashing beacon above is functioning. So we will be taking out those in-pavement lights. Like I said, it's been on our list. We've had some staffing issues, and we've had some other more urgent matters, so to speak, keeping our streets crew pretty busy. But I can tell you it will be happening soon to remove those. But to narrow the lanes, and then as Mr. Clarkson noted, is to do a follow-up speed survey to see if we can't reduce the posted speed, maybe 5, who knows, maybe 10, I doubt it, but I would say it might drop from 45 to 40 posted. And then see what that provides, because the volumes, quite frankly, on Carillion are not heavy enough that there are, a lack of what we call gaps in the traffic for vehicles and or pedestrians or bicyclists to, to make a movement across or turn into Carillion. So, but again, we can look at specific intersections, do specific counts. We can, go to that next level, if you will, just to see really what the data is and if there is something that can be done. If we're close, perhaps we can use some engineering judgment to get there. But again, we would have to, take it to another level as far as analysis. So.
Thank you, Mr. Selling. And then the same thing, engineering judgment, sometimes structure of the road. It does not going to meet the traffic. What the best we can do for the citizen to be feel safe. And that's, I think all council members, they want that. And I like to bring this back, if all the council ready, bring as an action item so we can take action and the different alternatives.
I want to clarify what you're kind of asking for. I've heard some suggestions from Mr. Papineau and Mr. Lozano about their interest in narrowing the lanes, which I would be in favor of. There's been other suggestions, the ones that I made about enhancing the crosswalks. Mr. Sandu is suggesting we, do an up-to-date analysis. I think somebody else suggested that as well. My concern would be if we come back, if we direct staff to do another study and they come back and let's say the 85th percentile increases from 44 to, 49, we're still within 5 miles per hour of the speed limit and nothing will change. That would clarify that 45 is the appropriate speed. I feel like we're kind of just kicking a can down the road. I want to remind everybody at the beginning of this discussion that somebody said that we shouldn't take a half-ass approach to this. And I completely agree with that. We voted on the Carillion plan to have a shovel-ready, have things shovel-ready for this corridor should we want to do any specific enhancements. There's clearly a need for enhancements. There's clearly a citizen cry out for such enhancements. So I don't want to just drag our feet on this and 6 months from now still be, meandering around trying to figure out what. I would support another traffic study, the current one. However, I'm skeptical that it will change. And for me, whether it changes or whatever, I'm not going to change my view on how I feel about doing something with these intersections. Again, I'm willing to compromise. I am definitely willing to compromise. I'm not crying out to throw all kinds of stop signs everywhere, but I think what I'm asking for is very reasonable. So if the consensus of this council would be that we want staff to come back with up-to-date traffic analysis, with keeping in mind that we're looking to narrow the lanes, I'm sorry, and possibly do some crosswalk enhancement, that's what I would be in favor of. I don't know, Mr. Sandu, Mr. Papineau.
Mr. Mayor, may I have a minute? And my main is let's go back to staff. They can be more looking at, they already heard all the comment what we did. As soon as maybe next or after that, bring them back as an action item. And a different alternative, staff might be think a little bit different terms, so we can make a decision. That's why I'm asking. I'm not asking 6 months. I'm asking immediately bring him back as an action item. This is not an action item. And I believe Mr. Hines knows this is not an action item.
Okay, Mr. Papineau?
Yeah, I just want to clarify between what you're saying and my understanding of what Mr. Selling was saying was, I understood him to be saying they recommend doing the lane narrowing and then doing the survey because we'd likely come back lower. I think you were correct. If we do a survey right now, it's going to go up, if anything. So, I just wanted to clarify that was of the recommendations that staff came with, items 1 and 2 put in place and then do a survey. And I think we're going to find ourselves in a much better place, probably with a lower speed and certainly a safer road. So that's just to clarify what I was asking for. And certainly the funding's got to come from somewhere, but sooner than later.
Councilman, thank you for clarifying that. I probably misunderstood that, and I saw Mike nodding his head, so I understand that. I'm going to let Councilman Vandenberg comment.
Thank you, Mayor Farmer. I agree with Councilman Pompano completely that we should take all the traffic reduction control measures first before we do an analysis. Otherwise, in my opinion, you're doing it backwards.
And I totally understand. Again, let's just say for theoretical, we were going to give direction to proceed forward with bringing an action item back as soon as possible to narrow the lanes, and then put up maybe some flashing speed signs to then try to the idea would be to try to bring the speed down, and then do another analysis to see if we could how that comes back. But if we do that, we're still not, in my opinion, addressing one of my biggest concerns, which is the crosswalk safety. That's just completely left out. And the other thing is, I don't know if the people on Vauxhall who signed a petition demanding a stop sign are going to just be satisfied with the compromise of we're going to just narrow the lanes and then we're going to do a traffic study. I mean, what time frame are we talking about? I mean, realistically, if we were to bring this back as an action item next meeting, just theoretical, and I know that we have really busy agendas, but if we were to be able to bring this back as an action item and we were to approve it, to do the narrowing of the lane and then do the re-traffic study, what kind of time frame do you think we're looking at, Mike?
Yeah, and I'll defer to Mr. Clarkson so I don't commit him to something unreasonable, but my expectation would be, we're approaching the winter months and we can't really do any restriping, in inclement weather conditions. Now, if it's a dry year, and we can get a solid weather window. And I think, it's probably going to take him, I don't know, I'm going to say a couple of months to put together a bid package and bid it. And we do have $250,000 that we budgeted for, some enhancements to Carillion. And so we'll have to get an engineer's estimate. But all that said, typical bid times and everything, we could probably be able to go to construction, I would say, February timeframe, and then again, weather permitting for the restriping. And then, you basically would probably want to wait, probably at least a month or so, just for traffic patterns to adjust to the new striping, and then do your speed survey. So, but I'll defer to Mr. Clarkson if he wants to modify that estimated schedule.
Mr. Clarkson? Your thoughts?
No, that sounds fine. That sounds fine.
So we're talking
time.
probably talking spring, like optimum, springtime, April, something. And then
Yeah, weather permitting, yeah.
And then we'd have to do this traffic analysis, bring it back, see what the result of that is, and then decide what further action. So, we're basically into summer, the school year, the whole school year. And I know things take time and you got to do it in the proper way, but again, it's my only concern.
What I would, just make the council aware of, Mayor, is that the additional analysis on the intersections could be running concurrent while we're preparing the bid package and whatnot for the restriping project.
Our city manager has his hand up. Vice Mayor, I'm going to let the city manager make a comment real quick because he's been waiting for a minute.
So I wanted to, first of all, commend you all. Excellent conversation. Excellent solutions. So what I would propose is in line with everyone else's proposal, is that you give Public Works the opportunity to come up with the restriping and sort of the redesign of Carillion with the intent of bringing down the speeds. Even though we're still working on the restriping and the bidding process, we still may be able, and Mike and Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, we still may be able to get trailers out there to at least start warning folks about the speeds and to get them to slow down. Now, one of the things that we had a discussion about, Public Works and I this week, is over in my former city, we also had slow down signs, but these signs had red and blue lights attached to them, and that always seemed to get everyone's attention. There's a city to the north of us that also has a trailer with red and blue lights. So I'm just saying that there are options for these trailers that will definitely get attention. The other thing, in addition, while we're waiting for the restriping plan and the bidding process to go through, is that perhaps Chief Kalinowski and his team can figure out a way to provide some, how should I say, additional enforcement and monitoring of the Carilion area. I realize that they have an entire city to worry about, but perhaps we can figure out some way for Carilion to be a focus of the Galt PD. And that should also slow down speeds as well, because right now we're doing, I think it's educational enforcement or informational enforcement, but at some point we're going to turn that off and we're just going to do enforcement. And so that should hopefully get everyone's attention as well. So Mr. Mayor and council members, so what I would recommend is that we continue with the restriping and let Director Selling and City Engineer Clarkson go through their process for restriping and the things that we talked about. But in the interim, we can bring on the trailers. We can also have the Galt PD take more focus and laser-like position on Carilion as resources permit.
Would it be too much to ask in that interim, which wouldn't be contingent on weather, to get the crosswalk at Chelsom the same signage that's at Vauxhall, which is just the simple metal signs that says that there's a crosswalk, and there's nothing at Chelsom at all?
Okay.
And also,
Yeah, that's easily doable.
Fixed. Well, I guess if the lights aren't working, taking them out, it's not going to really change much on Lake County. But I just would like to see consistency in the crosswalks. I think putting those signs up is not going to be a big deal, and it's not going to be weather conducive. But I like your ideas, Mr. City Manager. Obviously, I think we're making a big compromise here. I want to see what our Vice Mayor has to say here. Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Mayor, what we proposing on the Vauxhall, there is flashing light. I think that we need to expedite. We don't need to wait for the traffic study. That's why we are proposing on the Vauxhall, right?
Can we get Director Selling and City Engineer Clarkson to comment on that, please?
So as and I'll defer to Clarkson here in a second, but as he noted earlier in his presentation, that we've got a camera out there now, and so we're collecting data on it. I can tell you that as far as the flashing beacons go, they typically go by a warrant, essentially the same warrant that I mentioned before. There's two, one for school crossings and one for ped crossings. And so we would want to collect that data to see if it meets it, because again, if you place, a device like that, and I understand the Vice Mayor's concern, but there may be some other options that I think was mentioned. There's a sign for like a hill grade kind of thing, something like that, with maybe a flasher that we can look into that wouldn't require a warrant necessarily. So I would want to collect data though before we would look at putting a flashing beacon out there. So
you're saying there is probably something minimal we could do in the interim that would require a warrant in the Vauxhall area, in addition to appeasing the Vice Mayor, hopefully, and the citizens by doing the trailers that the City Manager suggested with the slow down, stuff, and then so those measures could be something we could implement, and then work towards the striping process and all that. Is that reasonable, Mr. City Manager?
I think it's reasonable as long as the data collection that they're currently performing on Vauxhall supports what the direction is. My only concern is and you all know that I am concerned about our citizen safety first and foremost. I'm also concerned about making sure that whatever measures we put in place that require a warrant meet those standards. Now, if there are things that we can do that don't require a warrant that can also meet or help us meet some of our needs, then I'm definitely open to that. So I'm interested to see the data from the camera that Director Selling and City Engineer Clarkson has right now on Vauxhall. Mike, that's correct? It's on Vauxhall. So I'm very interested in seeing the data that's collected Mike, what's a good sort of period of time? I'm sorry, Director Selling, what's a good period of time for us to collect data for it to actually be valid?
Typically, you'd want to do it a minimum of 7 days to get, the full range of what happens on, weekdays versus weekend days kind of thing. Okay. But we've typically done like 2 weeks is what we would look at typically. So I'll defer to Mr. Clarkson if he has anything to add on that or has a different perspective.
No, 2 weeks is what the standard that I've been using.
Okay, so Mr. Mayor and members of the council, what I would propose is that we let Public Works do the data collection on Vauxhall. And Vice Mayor Sandhu, this is also for you and the residents there at Vauxhall, is that we let the Public Works Department collect the data, and let's see where the data or what instrument that data points us to. I will report back to council at the next council meeting, because I believe that's 2 weeks away. And or Mark, I'm sorry, City Engineer Clarkson and Director Selling, is that okay, or is that still cutting it too close?
Can you repeat? I started making a note, so didn't catch that.
What I would like to do is come back to the mayor and city council at the next council meeting, and at minimum report out on, okay, here's the data that we're seeing so far from Vauxhall and Carilion, and here's sort of the solution that it's pointing to. If it's a situation where it's still falling short of the warrants, perhaps there's some interim step that we can use. But Mr. Mayor and the council members and Vice Mayor Sandhu and to the residents of Vauxhall, we can at least, I don't know if there's anything prohibiting us from at least rolling trailers into that area and to increase the enforcement in that area. And Chief Kalinowski, if there's any concerns about that, please let us know. But I want to make sure that the public understands and that the mayor and the council understand that this isn't a, let's talk about it now and let's hear about it again in 6 months. This is an ongoing thing. And so the folks on Vauxhall and all the folks up and down Carilion, we hear you. And so this is going to be an ongoing situation as we stated in our staff report back in June 15th. So that's the way I see things, and that's the way I would like to approach it, subject to the advice of our Public Works Director and our new police chief. So, Brian, did you, Chief Kalinowski, did you want to make a statement?
No, Mr. City Manager, I just wanted you to know that I was listening and I was aware of the directive, and we'll follow along.
All right. Thank you, sir.
So, Mr. Vice Mayor, would you be okay with having that data brought back to us at the next council meeting, and then we can assess what that data tells us, and then we can decide on what direction the council would like to go with at that point regarding what to implement, and what would that be okay with you?
Mr. Mayor, I don't have a problem. I'm okay, but they want to make sure when they look at the data, this is the structure of the road. I just want to make sure, the public work director, they look at he had to look them up. That data might be well not spotted, is the traffic. So they also have to consider, the structure of the road. This is a blind spot and how much distance. I just want to make sure.
Yeah, no, I think it's been understood that it's not been said that we're going to bring the data back, and if the data justifies doing something, and if it doesn't, we're not going to do anything. I think what we're doing is the council's asking to see that data so that we can, and then have Public Works make some recommendations on what tools they could use, if any, whether warranted or some that are not warranted, that don't require warrants, to try to appease the safety issue at Vauxhall and possibly other intersections. And then we can kind of proceed from there with our striping of the road and all these other things. That's what I'm understanding, I think. So that's my feeling. Is that clear, Mr. Hines?
That's clear to me. The council can also have the option at the next meeting of just looking at the data, and you also have the option of saying, okay, give it 2 more weeks. Let's see what 2 more weeks yields. And if it comes back more of the same, then we know that our sample is valid. and it valid not only in the council's eyes, but valid in the public and in Public Works' eyes. So you also have that option at the next council meeting. But I want to make sure you all know that while all these studies and data collection are going on, we are still taking action on Carillion, and just make sure that the folks out there watching understand that we hear them, and we will take the action, and this may require that we go get a couple more new trailers, and that's okay. We've got $250,000 appropriated for these things, and we'll do what we can to fortify Carillion.
Okay. Councilman Vandenberg, do you have comment about this? You're muted, sir. You're muted.
What action items will appear on the next agenda for Carillion Boulevard?
I believe the action item will be a authority to restripe and authority to narrow those lanes. And there will be authority to, I don't think we need the authority to do the trailer, but I do think that we need to look at restriping and going through that process of getting a contractor on board to do the restriping. So I think that's the only action item that's needed. Although, Director Selling, we already have $250,000 appropriated. How much do you think this restriping will actually cost?
I would defer to Mr. Clarkson. I believe it's probably insufficient.
Okay, all right. Then we will come back with a cost estimate for restriping, and we will probably be asking for an additional appropriation for the restriping, because clearly, based on what Director Selling is saying, $250,000 isn't enough, and we're going to have to go into the general fund balance to get this done.
I would also like to see any signage that doesn't require warrants as an option. Those type of items that were mentioned earlier.
Okay. Director Selling, your thoughts?
So yeah, maybe just a word of caution here on signs too, because you can get what we call sign pollution. So you don't want to be distracting the driver with so many signs that they're, not paying attention to what's going on in the environment. So yes, there are things that we can do, and whether that's may even require, adjustment of other existing signs or whatnot, or prioritizing. That's something that we'll definitely have to look at if we are going to place some additional signage.
And so, Councilmember Vandenberg, once Public Works does that analysis, then our recommendations will also appear as an action item as well. So you'll see restriping and signs that don't affect, or it won't create too much sign pollution, but that Public Works actually recommends. Now, with our initial plans for Carillion, the directive we got from council was, when you look at modifying one particular intersection, it is supposed to be modified with the other 10 intersections in mind. And so when Director Selling speaks that the signage that we put on the action item, the new signage, that some of the old signage may be affected as well and may need to be modified. Director Selling, do I have that correct?
Yes, that's accurate. Yeah, as you noted, you can't just look at it with blinders on at the intersection. You have to look at the corridor as a whole, particularly on an arterial, so where you're trying to move traffic.
So Councilmember Vandenberg, that's what you'll see. I did not want you or the other members of the council to be surprised by, wait a minute, why are we changing this sign? And it's because we've had to look at the whole stretch. As per our plan, the whole stretch is one stretch. But so Councilmember Vandenberg, those are the items that we plan on having as agenda action items at the next meeting. So there's the restriping, there is the possible signage. There will probably be some appropriations for additional paint because we're widening the bike lanes. And so those have to be green. So those are things that we want to bring before you now. And once we get clearance to do that, then the Public Works Department can go through their bidding process And then we can go through the survey process once all that's in place. And then we will come back to you after all that's in place, most likely March, April. And with a new engineering study, with all of these controls in place, and let's see where that study is versus where it is now, the study from 2018. And but the whole measure here is to slow down traffic on Carilion. So between the trailers, the restriping, the signage, making sure the vegetation on all the intersections is appropriate. We think that's a good place to start. We'll do the survey and we'll see where the survey points us.
I think it's important to note, Mr. Vandenberg, that next meeting when this stuff comes back, should the council or any member feel the need to, ask for additional direction to slightly modify what is being suggested, there will be an opportunity to do that. I know it's wouldn't be so much as an action item but there's always opportunity for suggested direction and to see what your fellow council members think. So I just want to throw that out there, that this doesn't mean that if, like, for example, for me, there's no discussion about, Lake Canyon crosswalk, which I'm very adamant about. But I do understand that once this data comes back in 2 weeks and we analyze all this, and Mike and his team say, well, this is what we think we could do. We could put this sign here. It doesn't need a warrant. We could definitely put some speed, we can do this or that, or the data from Voxel suggests that we could probably do this. And we might be very happy with the suggestions, or we may not be very happy and we could maybe ask something else. So I just want to remind, the Vice Mayor and Councilman Vandenberg that this doesn't mean that we're not, getting some things that we are passionate about.
Right.
Councilman Vandenberg, Councilman Lozano.
Yeah, having said that, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's exactly what I was going to say. I think for tonight, it's just my humble opinion, I think we beat this dead horse a little bit. And I think staff knows exactly where we're coming from, and unless I think we should move on to the next item.
So is it fair to say we have an understanding of where we're at with this right now and
Yes.
next meeting?
I believe so, sir. And I think Director Selling has a final word, hopefully.
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I wanted to clarify, we've got one camera and it's at Vauxhall now. So in these 2 weeks, we would only be looking at the data for that. So to do Lake Canyon, we would need an additional time to put the camera up and monitor what's going on there as well. So I just didn't want the mayor to think, well, what about Lake Canyon? Well, we need, another 2 weeks to look at that. So
I'm fine with that.
okay.
I want to see something done there, but I think in the spirit of the petition that came from the citizens at Vauxhall, I would like relinquish my focus onto Vauxhall for the moment, for the interim, the immediate moment. So
Okay, understood. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that. Thanks.
And so, Mayor, perhaps given Director Selling and City Engineer Clarkson, after we're done with the camera on Vauxhall, perhaps we can move it up to Lake Canyon and start collecting data there.
Okay. Do we have any do we have any public comment? Do we have any hands raised on this item before we move on? Rose.
Not have any hands raised online.
Okay. If you wish to make a public comment, you may do so now. We're only going to give you a few moments here to allow you to do that. You can press *9 if you're on the phone, or you can raise your hand if you are logged into Zoom. So give you a few more seconds here to do that. All right. Any additional comment?
No additional hands raised.
Okay. Moving on to our next item from the Public Works Department, item H3, going to be a solid waste ordinance amendment. Mr. Selling.
Thank you. Bear with me a second here while I switch gears on the presentation. I apologize, I got to run to the printer really fast. Bear with me a second. Okay. Let's see. Okay, hopefully you can see that. So good evening again, Mayor and council members. This item is to introduce an amendment to the city's solid waste ordinance necessary to comply with Senate Bill 1383, or what we commonly refer to as SB 1383. This presentation will largely be a repeat of what I presented at the last council meeting, but it's important to go over what's driving this amendment, as it will have significant changes for us all in how we think about and separate the waste we generate. So the city's solid waste ordinance is located in Title 8 of the Galt Municipal Code, and more specifically, Chapter 8.16.010 through 8.16.350. It was updated earlier this year to address two other mandates, AB 341 for commercial recycling and AB 1826 for commercial organics recycling. Generally, it provides the overall policy framework for various aspects related to solid waste, some of which are listed here at the bottom of the slide. So why does the ordinance need to be amended if we just updated it back in March? The answer is SB 1383. It's a major change in how solid waste is viewed and processed. Back in March, we didn't have a sufficient understanding of how SB 1383 would be implemented by the state, and there were a lot of clarifications that needed to be addressed. We've been working with other agencies in the area, along with Cal Recycle, and attending various informational webinars to resolve these issues. Specifically, SB 1383 requires agencies to have a compliant ordinance. SB 1383's essential purpose is to reduce air emissions of greenhouse gases its approach to this is two-pronged. First, as landfills are the major source of these greenhouse gases created from the organics breaking down over time, emissions can be reduced by removing the amount of organics in the waste stream. And then the second prong is by recovering edible food and distributing it to those in need, a portion of the organics never enters into the waste stream. Additionally, for the city to enforce these requirements, it's necessary to update our ordinance. And then lastly, as SB 1383 gives Cal Recycle enforcement authority over local agencies, updating the city's ordinance is necessary to avoid potential violations, penalties, and corrective action measures from the state. This slide is a bit redundant, as I've already touched on the other prior mandates, which were addressed in the March ordinance update. So I'll jump down to SB 1383, where it says this ordinance amendment. As the other mandates largely address the commercial side and recycling, and then also the commercial side organics recycling, 1383 takes it a step further and mandates it for residential as well. So the end goal of 1383 is for the state of California as a whole to achieve a 75% reduction in the amount of organics landfilled by 2025. The basis for this determination is 2014, where 23 million tons of organics were landfilled. So that means we as a state need to divert 17 million tons of organics annually by 2025. So I want to note that unlike prior mandates, there are no agency-specific goals or targets, meaning the city of Galt doesn't have a set number of tons that it has to divert. With regard to outreach on these mandates, there were a couple of presentations in 2019, and then two others earlier this year, and then a third at the last council meeting. City staff has sent letters back in 2020 in December to all the commercial businesses, and also informed the chamber at that time. And then there were also letters sent to affected commercial customers in both July and August related to the other two mandates. And then also the city's been working with Cal Waste to identify these commercial customers, to notify them of these mandates. And we'll continue to use our city social media and website and also advise through the city billings of these coming requirements. We continue to regularly meet with Cal Waste staff to assist with getting commercial accounts compliant, as well as how residential organics recycling will be conducted, and also in meeting the city's organics procurement requirements. So as far as the changes we need to make in our ordinance, this is the general list. Can I have that right? Yeah. We need to add and define a few terms like food recovery and food generators. We also need to include reference to the organics containers for residential, multifamily, and commercial. Of course, we need to reference the organics waste services. And along with adding the terms, we need to reflect the requirements for food generators and food recovery services. And then there's also the requirements for processing of the organics. And as there are special aspects to transporting organics waste, we need to reflect these requirements for any self-hauling as well. Lastly, well, it's not shown on the slide here, but we need to include language regarding inspections and investigations. So as far as next steps from here, as previously noted, an ordinance requires 2 steps. So pending tonight's action, it will be on the next council agenda for approval, and then, if approved, become effective 30 days thereafter. That effective date would be December 16th, which will allow for the city to be compliant prior to the January 1st deadline. Of course, outreach and education will continue and will well into next year as these programs come online and are implemented. And then Cal Waste will determine how it will conduct this residential organics recycling and deliver the carts or containers, depending on what approach they take. City staff will continue to review and process any waivers or applications for self-hauling. And I think we've received around 30 or so far. And then the city's website has largely been updated to provide information on these mandates and includes the waiver and self-haul forms for people to fill out if they so choose. And then there's also informational links and resources to Cal Recycle's website too. I didn't note it on the slide, but there's a couple other things that are going on too, and that includes staff developing the food recovery and organics procurement programs. And then relative to there's another solid waste item on, and as you all know, the ad hoc committee, if that's formed, we'll be helping to update the franchise agreement as applicable. That is essentially for residential organics, establishing the residential organics rate and any rate rebalancing, as was mentioned in previous meetings. And then going into 2022, staff and Cal Waste will begin implementing the programs noted and working cooperatively to monitor the programs and reporting to Cal Recycle to ensure the city's compliance. So Mayor and council members, this concludes my presentation, and I'm available along with Mr. Splendorio if there's any legal aspects to answer any questions. Thank you.
Mr. Lozano, hand up first. Yeah, just a question, and I apologize, Mr. Selling, for not getting this to you before tonight's meeting, but I did notice in Exhibit A, which is our definitions, there's a definition for green waste, which is our, your standard green waste. And then down on under U, it says organic waste, and it also includes green waste. I think I remember before you mentioning, or maybe it was our service provider mentioning that the possibility of collecting organic and green waste in the same bin is a possibility for residential.
That's correct, council member. There's 3 options really they're looking at. Is one would be to commingle it, like you just mentioned, meaning mixing the food waste in with the green waste and collecting it every week. The second option is a type of bag system where the food waste would be bagged, and then that bag put in that green waste carton, so it could be easily separated when they take it to their facility. And then the third one would be to have an actual 4th cart, so a separate cart just for organics waste. So,
but at any rate, that would have to be collected weekly, like the trash, correct?
Absolutely, yes. State law mandates that the organics have to, well, the food waste organics have to be collected weekly, yes.
So really the value of the split body truck, it just came in to
was shown very well just now, right? Because,
Yes.
oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah, that's all I have. I appreciate the report, and we've been over this several times, and I feel comfortable with where the direction we're going. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Lozano. Mike, I have a couple questions for you. One, actually, I had three, but one of them, my fellow council member just asked about the weekly pickup. I wanted to ensure we're going to be picking up food waste every week and not letting that stuff sit, because that was a concern. I personally would not be a fan of the fourth cart. I think you're going to really run into some logistics problems with that. And I know that, this is still up for discussion and Cal Waste hasn't decided yet, but, a lot of people having trouble just having the carts they have now, especially with all the businesses that have went from dumpsters to carts. I mean, just in the vicinity of my business, we have a ton of carts everywhere because everybody went from, 3-yard dumpsters or whatever that everybody shared to all these carts. And so to add another cart is just going to be like difficult. But I had another question about, it mentioned that, and I know some of the questions that were asked prior to the meeting were sent to us in an email. One of those questions was, when does the enforcement actually start? And the answer was technically starts this January in 2022. But my concern is, and I know when you say technically, it doesn't, enforcement, like hard, firm enforcement versus educational enforcement or whatever, I know can be a very fuzzy line. But if Cal Waste hasn't even decided exactly how they're going to be doing this and they're still doing that, we're in the middle of October right now. Is it likely they're going to have that decided and sorted out and implemented before January 1? Doesn't seem likely.
From my discussions with them, I think that they will have their methodology, determined by then. The challenge will be potentially on, you probably heard a lot in the news lately about the supply chain issues. And particularly as you kind of noted with the fourth cart, yeah, there's a space challenge probably with a lot of folks to add another cart. But there's also a supply chain issue too. To those things, if they go that route, could take months before they can get their order filled. I mean, you're talking roughly 7,000 carts. So if they were to look that way, so I think that could have a big play a big role into whether or not they go with the fourth cart. So. But as far as enforcement, yeah, it's hard to get a good sense of how strong or not Cal Recycle is going to approach this. The sense that we have is those agencies that do update their ordinance and can show substantial progress, if you will, toward compliance. In the coming months here, I think will likely get the benefit of the doubt, so to speak, from the state. So.
Yeah, I would hope that Cal Recycle, being that is going to be the enforcement arm initially, right, until 2024, when enforcement is kind of handed over to us, right? So I would hope that they would factor in things like breakdowns in the supply chain and that kind of thing. Of course, I know you can't comment to that, but I'm just throwing that out there that I would hope that would be the case. Our city attorney, Mr. Spondario, has his hand up. Frank, you have something?
Yes, just real quick, I'd like to add also to what Director Selling said. And the governor just signed a couple months ago, or this month actually, Senate Bill 619, which is going to give jurisdictions a little bit of relief from strict enforcement. So if the city basically submits a compliance plan saying it intends to get in compliance with SB 1383 by March of 2022, they will defer strict enforcement and penalties. So that's an additional protection that we have. And I know, staff's going to look at it, and if we feel like we need to avail ourselves of that, we're definitely going to do it. So it's not just, I would say, informal. I would say there are some formal protections as well that we can look to avail ourselves of.
Good to know. Good to know. Councilman Vandenberg, you were next.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a couple curiosities, really. On 816.050L, it states that the remote monitoring program shall involve installation of remote monitoring equipment. Is that we're going to be spying with cameras on garbage? Is that just in there as a precautionary, or is that an actual idea?
No, some agencies are doing that, and just to allow for that potential, should Cal Waste ever look to do that the ordinance allows for that. There are no current plans to do any monitoring, though. I can tell you that right now. So.
Okay, that's good. Has anybody brought up the possibility that we will be producing more greenhouse gases and more harm to the environment by requiring or the necessity of a fourth cart due to increased routes or change of trucks that would cause a change in this law?
I have not heard of any. I don't know that there's been any analysis done on that, council member. I'd be speculating, but essentially I would say that the state would likely, the response would be that it would be incidental and not significant, but understand your point.
Thank you. And then just so it's probably, again, in the public square, all of this is mandated. It's really, for the most part, out of our control. We're just trying to do the best we can.
Was that a question or a statement?
That was a statement. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Lozano.
Yeah, just briefly, just for transparency purposes, I feel the need to make the statement that back, I believe in the March meeting, we as a council or council members were asking why we need to do this so quickly. And so just know that things will come up that will delay the enforcement piece of this. But I think we have pushed this as far out as we can, and we'll just take advantage of those supply chain issues and all of those other things. But honestly, it wasn't but 6 months ago we were asking to push this thing out further. So it is what it is. But I think there's some things in the environment that are happening now that will help us in the long run.
Vice Mayor Sandhu.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe, thank you for Mr. Selling bring that detail, not one time, three, 4 times. This is state mandate. My only question is on that, can you a little bit explain about self-hauling, how it work, and it's just only organic waste, or you can have apply for self-hauling for everything like a recycle or?
Yes. Well, this is speaking specifically to organic self-hauling. So if you had a business, possibly a restaurant, but I would say more likely like a grocery store or something like that has spoiled produce or whatnot, that they may have an arrangement to haul it to a farmer that has pigs or something like that. I don't know. This is just me kind of making this up on the fly, but yeah, where they could demonstrate that, look, they've hauled those organics to a place where they're being used, they're not being landfilled, or sometimes it gets made into pet food and whatnot is my limited understanding. So if they can demonstrate that, that will qualify as self-hauling. I believe that the ordinance, I'd have to double check it. I believe that the ordinance does allow for some recycling self-hauling as well, in the same vein. And the example that comes to my mind, which is actually a variation of self-hauling called backhauling, but like Cardinal Glass. So they have a lot of broken glass cullet that basically gets somehow transported back to one of their actual factories where the glass is made. So they would be a good example, I guess, of recycling, self-hauling or backhauling. So,
thank you. My other question, Mr. Selling, my other question is, there is some kind of little bit bill going to increase, right? Is already in 2018 agreement, right? And when these bill going to affect, or if we going to delay, it can be affecting on a delay date, or is January 1st, 2022?
So not to get into the potential next item again, but that would be one of the things that we would be working on with Cal Waste as to what the rates would be. The current franchise agreement already has organics recycling rates for commercial. It does not for residential. So that will need to be determined. And of course, they wouldn't charge it until they actually can provide the service. So, and if that's weeks or hopefully not terribly long into next year, they wouldn't be able to charge it until they provide the service. I don't have a good sense of what that is now. I can tell you it is going to be pricey though. Unfortunately, there aren't very many facilities where you can take these organics materials to either be in kind of a cogen plant where it's essentially incinerated for energy, or turning it into pet food and other potential alternatives. So it is expensive. And the other thing too with that is Galt is unfortunately not near any of these facilities. A lot of them are in the Bay Area or even up north. So they're hauling this stuff, 50, 70, 80 miles for the most part to take it to one of these facilities. So there's additional hauling costs too that bumps it up for us, unfortunately.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mike, I was under the impression that Cal Waste had been discussing about their digester or some kind of apparatus that they had or wanted to have. Is that not what you're referring to, where the organic waste would have to be hauled to?
So yes, and I mean, that's another piece of the puzzle that you're touching on, Mayor, is Cal Waste has said if they could cite a transfer station facility, in the general area, then they would like to put in a digester, an anaerobic digester, and then obviously, if that were the case, being in close proximity to Galt, you wouldn't have the hauling costs, so it would reduce those costs. There is the capital cost of the digester itself. There's time to permit it and everything. So that would be something that, even if all the ducks lined up, so to speak, you're probably looking at a minimum of 3 years out, I would say.
Okay, so that leads me to my next question, whereas we're talking about, enforcement starting roughly January, maybe March, whatever, us forming an ad hoc committee to work with Cal Waste on what those rates are going to be, et cetera, all preceding this program. We still have this possible deal with Cal Waste up in the air. I want to know what's the timeline on that, because it seems to me that if these two council members, whoever they are part of an ad hoc committee to help negotiate this, that piece is going to be a critical piece of that puzzle. That piece is going to very well have an effect on what those rates could be or will be. And I think they're intertwined together. So I feel like they have to be hand in hand. So does anybody want to comment on that? Maybe you or city manager, or I don't know who's best to answer that question.
Yeah, I'll start if he wants to jump in. What I would say is realistically, you're correct. I mean, there's just time involved. Even if a deal can be struck relatively quickly, they're still going to have to start taking this material somewhere come next year. And so I would say that there's going to be a rate for that, whatever that process is, whatever that looks like, until such time as, if their facility's online and they're going to be able to utilize it for such. So then there would be a different rate, or, I would say a reopener on the contract or whatnot at that point in time. But I think you're looking at an initial rate, and then hopefully it's going to drop if that, all comes to pass. So.
And that makes sense. I was just saying, I was more, and I know it would take time to implement. I was just more looking for it's going to be really hard to nail down a rate if they aren't given, if the council is not, able to solidify a proposed deal with them on a transfer station, theoretically. If we're not able to pin that down, I mean, I don't see how they're going to be willing to concede a certain rate, or we're going to be able to negotiate the best rate for the city, for the residents of this town, if we're not able to give, there's not some kind of give and take, right? Mr. Hines, thoughts?
Oh, I agree. And this is going to be a negotiation, but I concur with Director Selling, and we're just going to have the conversation with them. And I think the expectation is if this operation comes online, we're going to want to see what the impact on their operational expenses are going to be.
Okay. Well, I think that wraps up my questions. Like I said, I just feel like I just can foresee Cal Waste just saying, well, what about this transfer? What about this? Because I mean, they're not gonna. I mean, it's hard to drive a bargain when there's an unknown. I mean, they might be skeptical that that's even going to go through. They're really gun shy, I think, at this point, based on the history of them trying to get such a facility in town in the past. I think this shot now is probably the best shot they've had ever. But nothing's a done deal, right? I mean, the council hasn't proved it. We don't know, and that unknown is going to be a big dark cloud looming over. I mean, it's almost like we may end up having to strike a deal, like a short-term deal, on what these rates are going to be, and then revisit them in 6 months or 1 year, based on if these negotiations for a proposed facility are not nailed down. I don't know. I'm just throwing out my thoughts.
No, Mr. Mayor, you're already developing deal points. Very good. You're already developing them.
All
so
right.
thank you.
Do you guys have any comments on this item before we move on to the second piece of this? All right. So this is read by title only. So my understanding that this solid waste ordinance amendment is going to come back on consent next meeting. Is that my understanding, or soon?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
It would be the next meeting. It would be on consent.
Okay. All right. Do we have any public comment on this particular item? Rose.
I have no hands raised online.
Okay. So if you are watching online, you would like to comment on this particular item, or on the next item for that matter, forewarning, you can raise your hand on Zoom, or you can press *9 if you're on the phone, and that will raise your hand. We will call on you. So I'll give you a few moments to raise your hand, or get your hand raised on the phone if you would like to do so before we move on. Again, this item will be on our consent calendar next meeting in 2 weeks, so there will be an opportunity to speak on it then before it goes through its final approval with the consent calendar. All right, no comments, no hands?
No hands raised.
Okay. All right, thank you, Mr. Selling, for that. We'll move on. Our next item is going to be H4, which is the formation of a solid waste ad hoc committee and the appointment of 2 members. Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, so I believe it was at the sorry, did you say something, Tina?
In the past, we've always done a
Yeah.
motion for.
Yeah, sorry. I was trying to unmute my phone, and when you need to rapid fire, I would not make a good pilot. Yes, we're gonna need a motion on that, because that is to introduce the ordinance by title only, and to waive the first reading, and we have to do that per state law.
Okay, I apologize. I was thinking something like that, but all right. So I'm going to need a motion to introduce, read by title only, and waive the first reading of the ordinance amending Chapter 8.16 of the Galt Municipal Code regarding solid waste collection. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Lozano.
Seconded.
Seconded by Councilmember Papineau. Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Vice Mayor Sandu,
Aye.
Councilmember Papineau,
Aye.
Councilmember Vandenberg,
Aye.
Councilmember Lozano,
Aye.
Mayor Farmer.
Approved 5-0. Now we will move on to the item H4, the formation of solid waste ad hoc committee and appointment of 2 council members. Mr. Selling.
Yeah, so maybe just quickly, back on September 21st, Cal Waste made a presentation, and through the discussion that followed that presentation, there was, I guess, the suggestion of a potential ad hoc committee. to address a few items that are going to be tied into complying with these mandates. And from that discussion, I think the city attorney recommended that we bring an item back to the council to consider forming an ad hoc committee composed of 2 council members, and which would be supported by the city manager, the city attorney, and myself. The major work items that this ad hoc committee would be tasked with would be amending the current franchise agreement to include a residential organics recycling rate, to review the commercial organics recycling rates as they were set back in 2017-18, and speculative, I guess you could say, at that time. Now that we know what the costs are, or at least Cal Waste has a better understanding of the costs. So that would be a piece of it. The issue of the potential for a transfer station to be considered. And I think lastly, there was the original agreement identified that there would be a review of the rates after 3 years. And what Cal Waste has indicated is there's some savings due to a lack of downward migration, if you will, amongst the residential accounts. So there's some funds there that could be potentially used to rebalance the rates. So those are the items, the major items of work that the ad hoc committee would be tasked with over the coming months. And that concludes my comments. Definitely
some very dicey stuff, and it's nothing to be taken lightly. So the question is, who wants to get in the trenches? I think I just want to put 2 cents, and I know that I mentioned, throw some names out there last time. Again, any 2 of us, would be sufficient to probably handle this task. I would like to emphasize, just because of what happened with the last garbage contract, it would probably be, I'm not saying it required, but I would like to see at least myself or Paul as one of the 2 members, only because we're brick and mortar business owners here. And I feel that obviously both being chamber members, I mean, there's other, I know Mr. Lozano is also a chamber member, I think. But just to give sufficient representation and be kind of a liaison on behalf of the chamber and those businesses in this process too, I think it's important because of what happened last time. So I'm only throwing that out there. And I'm not saying that if Paul or I are not one of the 2 that I'm going to throw up my hands and protest. It's only a suggestion.
Mayor, Mr. Mayor, may I say something? I don't have a problem, and I believe I was not in the last meeting, but you mentioned Mr. Farmer and Mr. Lozano. If you guys are available, and I don't have a problem with that.
Mr. Lozano, you have your hand up. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I would be interested in doing that. I think it's, I think all of us really have a lot of background on it, but certainly from the beginning, I think I could offer some opportunity there.
Yeah.
Happy with that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be willing, reluctantly. I know it's going to be a difficult task. It's going to be very, very tough, and it's not going to be easy. But I would definitely, do it on behalf of the council with Mr. Lozano. And hopefully we can come out of that with the minimal bumps and bruises as possible, I think, for the city. So if Mr. Lozano is okay with that, I would like to offer my service, and he has consented that he would like to offer his. So if we need a motion for that, or what are we looking for here, Frank?
Yes, a motion.
All right, so can I have a motion to appoint myself, Mayor Farmer, and Councilmember Lozano to the Solid Waste Ad Hoc Committee?
Moved
by Vice Mayor Sandu.
Seconded.
Can I have a roll call, please?
Vice Mayor Sandu,
Aye.
Councilmember Papineau,
Aye.
Councilmember Vandenberg,
Aye.
Councilmember Lozano,
Aye.
Mayor Farmer.
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen.
All right, thank you, Mike. Do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not have any hands raised online.
Probably should ask for public comment prior. But I didn't hear Frank speak up, so.
Yes, you should. I apologize.
Well, we'll go ahead and hear comment. If there's a comment, then if we have to redo we can redo the vote. I'll give a few moments for anybody listening to raise your hand on Zoom, or you can press *9 if you're on the phone, and you can comment on this particular item. We are talking about the formation of the Solid Waste Ad Hoc Committee, appointment of 2 council members. It's being suggested that myself and Councilman Lozano are the appointees. Give a few moments for any comment. No hands raised online, Rose?
No hands raised online.
All right, are we good, Frank, or do we need to revote? Mr. Splendario?
You're good to go, Mayor.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. We will now move on to our next item, item I, communication. Do we have any communication this evening?
And not this evening.
Okay. Next item J, city clerk's report. First and only item is going to be the Measure R Independent Citizens Oversight Committee appointment. Tina?
Okay, so the recommendation is to review the applications and consider appointments to the 2 vacant positions on the Measure R Independent Citizens Oversight Committee. The Measure R Independent Citizens Oversight Committee has 2 vacancies appointed by the entire city council, with both terms ending April 2024. Galt Municipal Code Section 3.40.150 states no committee member may serve more than 2 consecutive 3-year terms. Kamalani Martin was appointed on May 15th, 2018 and chose not to reapply. And Tony Lara was appointed on June 16th, 2020, and he gave his resignation on January 11th, 2021. The city clerk's office has been advertising the vacancies on the city's website and social media. We have received 3 applications that have been received by Richard Hartley, Linda Clendenden, and James Connick, and each applicant meets the required qualifications. They have been invited to attend the meeting. I'm not sure if they're on the line, if you have questions, but again, it is an entire city council appointment for 2 vacancies.
Okay. Rose, do we have any of the 3 applicants online?
No, we do not.
Okay. Does any of the council have any questions before or comments? Well, I can start it off. I did review the 3 applicants. I first want to thank the 3 of them for applying. I think anytime you have a citizen willing to get involved and be a part of the workings of the city and volunteer for such a thing, especially Measure R, which is a very, very important committee. Can't understate that. So I was very pleased with the applicants. I personally, actually, I'm sorry. I'm going to let Mr. Lozano, you have a comment before I.
Yes, I just want to comment that I personally know Linda, and I think she would be an awesome choice for this position. I spoke to her at great length about it over time, and I think she would be awesome.
Mr. Sandhu.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to recommend James Connick on this committee. He did a lot of work for this, volunteer work for this city. Thank you.
Does any Councilman Vandenberg or Councilman Papineau have any thoughts on the applicants? No.
Both of the 2 mentioned, and they're certainly Mr. Connick's experience with Measure R has a tremendous knowledge, and I think a fair mind about it, as well as having spoken with Ms. Clendenden several times. I'd be fully in favor of both of those people.
Okay. Well, I was actually very impressed with Mr. Hartley's application as well. He seems to have some experience in the law enforcement realm, among other things. Very extensive application. So I know it's a tough decision. We only have 3 spots and 2 applicants. I mean, we have 2 spots and 3 applicants. So, you know, any of the 2 of the 3 would probably be a very good choice. It's very difficult. So, I mean, at this point, someone wants to make a motion to select, appoint 2 members. Mr.
Mayor, just make sure you go to public comment before vote.
Yes. All right, if you are listening and you want to make a public comment, please do so now. You can raise your hand online with Zoom, or you can press *9 if you're on the phone, and that will raise your hand and we will call on you. They'll give everybody about a minute before to have a chance to do that before we make a selection. Again, for those of you watching, we are discussing the appointments to the Measure Our Oversight Committee. We have 3 applicants and we have 2 positions open. All right, give a few more seconds here.
We have no hands raised online.
Okay. I'm going to close the public comment time period now, so raise your hand now. Nothing, Rose?
Nothing.
Okay. All right, the comment is now closed on this item. Rich?
Yeah, I would like to make a motion to appoint Linda Clendenin and Jim Connick to the Measure R Committee.
Do I have a second on that motion?
I second that.
Seconded by Councilman, motion made by Councilman Lozano to appoint Mr. Connick, and I apologize, I forgot, what was her last name? How do you pronounce it?
Linda Clendon. I apologize. Linda Clendenin.
Clendenin. I know, that's why I didn't want to get it wrong and butcher it up. Ms. Clendenin and Mr. Connick, and seconded by Councilman Vandenberg. Roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Sandu.
Aye.
Councilmember Papineau. Councilmember Vandenberg.
Aye.
Councilmember Lozano.
Aye.
Mayor Farmer.
Aye. Appointments approved 5-0. And for Mr. Hartley, if you are watching this or watching in the future, I don't want to discourage you from reapplying. We have openings that do come up, and we would be happy to have you aboard if the time should propose itself. So thank you for your application, sir. All right, without further ado, we will move on to our last item, K, comments by staff. Mr. Hines?
Yes, I don't have any comments other than I really appreciated the conversation tonight about Carilion. I think we made some good progress. I'm going to start with City Attorney Frank Splendario. Frank, I believe you're on mute. Or either you're very quiet tonight.
I'm sorry. Good evening. I have, thank you, City Manager. Good evening, Mayor, Council. Nothing to report out tonight.
All right, very good. Let's go with Parks and Recreation Director Armando Solis.
Yes, can I get shared screen, please?
Yep. Give me just one moment. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, I just wanted to go, everybody can see the screen?
Yes.
All right, just wanted to go over an event that we had this weekend. Very proud of our staff. Was a huge success. Our harvest market down on 4th Street Promenade and our scarecrow stroll. There's a couple of pictures of the scarecrows, and as you can see in that middle picture, how busy it was. I just want to give a shout out to Jackie for doing an incredible job, and Chelsea. So wanted to give them a shout out. Events coming up, we have our spookishly fun movie night. That'll be this Friday. Our contingency is to go into Littleton if it rains. So we will have this rain or shine. Then starting next week, the Great Galt Pumpkin Hunt starts. We are still accepting registrations. It's currently with the late fee through the 25th. So if people want to register, appreciate that. And I want to make sure you guys save the date. This year, we plan on having the lighting of the night event. There will be some modifications. There will be a parade. We are not going to have all the indoor events. We will have some choirs out by the tree. So I hope you guys save the date for that. And I want to thank Armando Morales and his landscape crew. They're starting to do a lot of trimming around the city. And they're continuing to do good work. That's it for me.
All righty. Thank you, Director Solis. Let's go with Chief of Police, Brian Kalinowski. Brian, you're on mute.
You would think I was paying attention tonight and keep myself off mute when I'm supposed to. Good evening, Mayor and Council members. I just have one brief item from the department. Next Thursday at 3 p.m., we'll be doing a swearing in ceremony for new employees and those recently promoted, including myself, but we've had some professional staff that have been elevated in the organization, and we want to recognize their promotions also. So we'll be recognizing 2 of our newest officers, 1 of our newest dispatchers, and then a handful of other folks. And that again will be next Thursday at 3 p.m., the 28th of October, in front of the police department, similar to what we did last time 4 or 5 months ago. It was a good success. We try to schedule those on a training day when we have most of the staff in or about the building. So we invite the public and obviously council and staff that are available to come on down. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Chief, when was that again? I'm sorry. What was the date on that?
Thursday, October 28th, 3 p.m. at the PD.
Thursday, 28th at 3 p.m. Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Mayor, if you'd like, we can send out a reminder to council.
Please, good, yes.
Okay. Tina Rose, can you make that happen?
We'll do that.
All righty. Thank you so much. And let's go with community. Oh, well, Stephanie Van Stein, our Human Resources Director, just popped on. So let's go with her.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Some of our current job opportunities. We have quite a few part-time temporary positions open in our Parks and Recreation Department. We are recruiting for a sports official, and that's for youth basketball. We have an office assistant 1 opening, parks worker 1, parks worker 2. Also our recreation workers for sports and ACES and SOAR. And then for full-time openings, we are still recruiting for police officers. So if you know anyone that's interested, please direct them to our HR website.
Thank you, Director Van Stein. Let's go with Community Development Director Craig Hoffman.
Hello, Mayor, members of the council. Nothing tonight. Thank you.
All right. I know the council is probably missing all of those community development issues that popped up over the last few months. So we'll do what we can to get some items back on the agenda for them, because I'm seeing sad faces all around the meeting. So Craig.
No one looks that sad to me.
Very good, very good. Public Works Director Mike Selling.
Thank you, City Manager. Yeah, just real quick, the Meadowview project, resurfacing project is going to be starting, I think, next week, weather permitting. So I'm sure those residents will be looking forward to their new street coming up. And then I just wanted to express our appreciation for Armando and his parks crew for clearing the vegetation out there near Vauxhall and Carillion and some of the other locations too. They're definitely greatly appreciated in their efforts in helping to improve traffic safety out on the Carilion corridor. So thanks.
All right, very good, very good. Thank you, Director Selling. City Clerk Tina Hubert.
Nothing further.
All right. Executive Assistant Rose Rodacker.
I have nothing tonight. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Mayor, that concludes staff comments.
Thank you, sir. We will move on to comments by city council members and future agenda items. We'll start with our Vice Mayor, Mr. Sandhu.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everybody again. First of all, I would like to thank you, all the staff, doing us a good report, giving us a detailed report. Thank you for all the staff. Thank you, especially thank you for the city manager. And I would like to also thank you all the public comments regarding Carilion Boulevard or some other regarding that mask mandate in the school. I like to also thank you all my city council. Take a time to take the comment and we try to communicate each other. And the next agenda item is I believe on September 21st, unfortunately I missed the meeting. Galt Market Weekend Operation Feasibility Study. If somebody from mayor or city manager just can explain what we did on that. Did we take any action or bring in the next agenda item? Could you please?
Well, Vice Mayor, if you like, I can chat about it with you offline, or I can give you a quick summary now.
If you can, a quick summary,
okay.
I would like to, very brief.
So we had a pretty lively discussion about weekend operation hours. I think the council's consensus was that the item needed more discussion, and that it would come back in a future agenda when all 5 of you were present. There was a conversation about opening up the market during the weekend at the level of the Tuesday, Wednesday markets versus perhaps coming up with some level of pilot, small steps to see if we can gauge the vendor and public interest toward moving to and competing or participating in the market. So we have to continue that discussion. I can give you more details offline, and the meeting was recorded, but in summary, that's where we are. And so we just need further discussion on moving forward. As I said in the meeting, we did an analysis, we chatted with vendors, we chatted with the public. I think the seeds of success are there. It's how we sow them.
Thank you, sir. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Papanow.
Thanks to everybody for the input and conversation. I feel like we made some pretty good progress on this traffic stuff tonight and this month. And then regarding the mask thing, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is we'll be getting a report back after Mr. Solis has his meeting with his counterparts. So if that's the case, I don't believe I need to ask for anybody to join me in putting an item on the agenda to talk about that. Is that correct?
Yes, and also Councilmember Papanow, I'll be reaching out to the Chief Health Officer and the county to see if I could speak with her or one of her staff about the mask mandate and some of the confusion around that as well. So we'll not only get some input from Director Solis and his peers around the region, but we'll also reach out to the leadership of the council, and we may reach out to Supervisor Natoli as well and get his thoughts on things.
Okay. Thank you much. That's all I have.
All right. Councilmember Vandenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, staff, for the reports, and thank you for putting up with all of our questions and long-winded debates. I found it quite informative. So thank you for all the information. I had the opportunity to go to the fundraiser for the Grewal family at Brewster's and speak with the family for a moment. And they wanted to express to the entire city how much love they felt from the community. And they really appreciated it. And so all the outpouring of support did make a difference. That's all I have, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Thank you, sir. For me, I wanted to mention, because I totally forgot in the beginning, and I apologize to my fellow safety committee members and to the chief and to the lieutenant and everybody who was there last night, but we actually had a safety meeting last night. It was a very good meeting, very lengthy. We discussed some things such as the West Nile mosquito activity in the area, with concerns and regarding West Nile, and how the city's been proactive in that. And we discussed a couple other really important items, vaping issues at the schools, and specifically it's kind of becoming a little bit of an epidemic, and there's people selling vape products to schools. So we had a very good discussion about it. I think we came up with a little bit of a plan about how we can have our SROs work with the school district about coming up with maybe some education at the school, and you know, help the school district in any way we can to try to get education out there. So it was very eye-opening. Then we had a discussion about a new system that was presented by our Officer Little. Very interesting discussion about a new camera system that's looking to be deployed in the city of Galt, should the council approve such a thing. I don't want to get into the details of it, but it could be a game changer when it comes to solving crime, and especially petty crimes such as vehicle theft, catalytic converter theft, that kind of thing that has plagued our community for a long time. So I'm excited to see that item come forward to the council. I know Councilman Vandenberg, or Councilman Lozano was present, and of course Vice Mayor was present. So the three of us were able to see that. And like I said, I look forward to seeing that brought back. I think I would very much be in favor of something like that, and like to hear more about it. So other things, I just want to thank PD for the enforcement. Again, awesome, you know, seeing our traffic officer out there. I want to thank the PD personally. I got a very thankful message, I guess you'd call it, from our resident on Crow Creek Drive that was visited by our motor officer, and he was very pleased with finally getting you know, some of his concerns that being addressed with the radar trailer out there, and officers still spoke with him about, you know, the areas. So thank you for that. Thank you, Officer Steele, and all the enforcement you guys are doing, the education, the social media, all of it. I'm very happy with it, and look forward to seeing it continue, especially on Curlian Boulevard. So last but not least, we got an email the council did about the Teen Center is going to have their grand opening on October 21st at 2:30. They've been very active, that group, and it's going to be at 550 C Street in the old building under the water tower. So if any of the citizens want to come, or the council, it's October 21st at 2:30 p.m. And other than that, I just want to make mention of Officer Herrera still being in our thoughts as she still recovers from her injuries. So I want to make mention of her and her family. We're thinking about them. And it's good to have the Vice Mayor back for, you know, being overseas, and we missed you a couple meetings, and it was good to have you back. So condolences again. So that would be Mr. Lozano, you have your hand up before I close out.
Yeah, I don't have really anything other than just to thank staff, and then for everything they did. I also appreciate all the citizen support, you know, throughout the year, but certainly when issues pop up, you know, calling in and voicing their concerns, and we certainly all take that to heart. And then just one last thing, as it relates to the vaping and the drug use is the other thing that was mentioned. It looks like that one extra point is that there's going to be some work done in conjunction with the school district and police department to put in detectors that would detect for vaping and things like that. As the mayor mentioned, the person that was talking about it, said that these otherwise legal substances that adults use and have access to are being sold to kids, and it's getting to be a real problem on campus. So I'm glad we can partner with the school district and come up with some solutions on how to fight this. And that's all I have. Thanks.
All right, I totally apologize, Rich. I didn't even realize that I skipped right over. I was reading some notes and I thought I went through everybody. So my apologies.
All good. I felt like the mayor for like 2 seconds there.
Yeah, just don't. I mean, you should have just been like, hey, excuse me. I mean, you had your hand up, but I apologize. My bad. So yeah. So with that, we will wrap up and we will adjourn the meeting at 9:45 p.m. Everybody have a good evening and have a safe week. Thank you.